Chapter 23:23. These experts of the Blood Crow Church roared. They abandoned their opponents and surrounded Yi Shiwen. What's wrong? Are you distressed? Yi Shiwen raised the corner of his mouth, and a faint smile flashed across his face. It seemed as if he was ridiculing them. You guys have done all sorts of evil deeds. You should have died long ago. Yi Shiwen held the long sword in his hand and remained motionless. He looked like a demon god as his sword fluttered in the bloody wind. You've killed so many experts of my church. I think you're tired of living. There's no place for you in this world anymore. An incomparably powerful expert of the Blood Crow Church roared, and suddenly pounced towards Yi Shiwen. He had condensed his own principles. He was a sage-level expert. Great Sage Realm was already the peak of the human race nowadays. These old monsters had basically gone into hiding in order to ascend. Otherwise, they would still die when their 1,000 years of lifespan were up. Basically, the top experts that ordinary people could see nowadays were at the sage level. Even if they were only at the sage level, they could already chase after the stars and the moon. They could carry mountains and boil seas. Their strength was extraordinary. So, it was not a problem for them to cross the interstellar space. Idiot! The iron sword in Yi Shiwen's hand swept across the sky. The sword energy soared for thousands of meters, and directly penetrated the head of this Sage Realm expert on the spot. Blood mixed with brain matter splattered out. A puny Sage Realm expert dares to be arrogant in front of me. Finally, everyone reacted. This Yi Shiwen was not as simple as the strength he had displayed. They had seen a Xiantian Realm expert killing a Sage Realm expert like killing a chicken. Not to mention the sword in his hand. A powerful divine tool could indeed allow people to challenge higher levels. However, they had never heard of a Xiantian Realm expert killing a Sage Realm expert. That had already exceeded the level that a divine tool could achieve. Even if a Xiantian expert was given a divine tool, it would still be useless. So, he was certainly not as simple as he looked on the surface. He must have some other trump cards. This person was not simple. Boy, you dare to meddle in the business of our Blood Crow Church. You're dead. The Archbishop of the Blood Crow Church had gone crazy. A sage expert was hard to come by. However, he had been stabbed to death by Yi Shiwen's sword. This was going to hurt his vitality. Great hatred! Great hatred! It was especially so in recent years. Although the Pilgrimage Palace was the main force hunting them down, due to their history, the other major forces were also openly and covertly rejecting them. Evil and heretical people should be punished, and it was not just a slogan. Evil and unorthodox. Yi Shiwen sneered, and a murderous aura swept out from his body. It was as if the most terrifying and austere atmosphere had swept out. What's wrong with killing a few of you? I didn't see you feeling distressed when you used people to practice your martial art. This is the cycle of karma and the retribution of the heavens. Yi Shiwen said. Courting death. Archbishop Shuya pressed forward coldly. Step by step, he was extremely tyrannical. Compared to that saint, it was unknown how much more tyrannical he was. This was the strength of a great saint, far surpassing that of a saint. A long spear appeared in his hand. He walked over step by step, and directly stabbed towards Yi Shiwen. Boom! In an instant, fragments appeared in the sky, and a huge vacuum appeared. Even the clouds in the sky were dispersed. This spear was as thick as a mountain ridge, and it pierced downwards. Clang! The long sword in Yi Shiwen's hand met the tip of the spear. Bang! There was a huge roar, and they finally collided together. It was a fierce collision. Countless laws on Archbishop Shuya's body swept out wildly, trying to kill Yi Shiwen. At this time, a powerful fallen angel appeared on Yi Shiwen's sword of angels, protecting him in it. These laws could not hurt Yi Shiwen at all. Although the sword of angels was not a very balanced martial instrument for offense and defense, it was more than enough to resist the suppression of a great saint. Yi Shiwen's eyes suddenly opened and turned into the eyes of redemption. The endless power of redemption twisted into a mountain and a world, and it also suppressed towards Archbishop Shuya. This was a kind of majestic power that instantly drowned Archbishop Shuya. At this time, Archbishop Shuya did not give in at all. Bloody clouds appeared in front of him, blocking Yi Shiwen's power of redemption without giving in at all. With Yi Shiwen's current skill, it was naturally impossible to exert the Eye of Redemption to its fullest potential. However, Yi Shiwen didn't intend to rely on the power of redemption to finish off this great Sage Realm opponent. The angel's sword in his hand was constantly clanging and emitting an astonishing radiance. Buried Earth Sword. The sword of angels in his hand grew bigger and bigger in the sky. Soon, like a huge mountain range, it slashed down towards Archbishop Shuya. Boom! Even the sky was shattered by this huge force. The momentum was heavy, and it borrowed the force of the attack to directly sweep down. The Blood Crow Archbishop was also extraordinary. The Blood Crow cult naturally had its own inheritance. To be able to make the son of venerable immortal Yuan Miao give up the martial ancestors' martial arts cultivation and choose the Blood Crow cult's martial arts, one could imagine that he was not a simple person. His long spear went up. Dang! There was a huge roar. Archbishop Shuya only felt that his whole body was trembling, and a strange force was raging in his body. He gritted his teeth and barely held on. He had already seen that Yi Shiwen's power came from the Sword of Angels in his hand. Without the Sword of Angels, Yi Shiwen could not defeat a great sage no matter how heaven-defying he was. He did not believe that Yi Shiwen could hold on for long with his skill. With such consumption, an ordinary innate realm master could not resist a blow and would be directly drained and turned into a mummy. Swoosh! Suddenly, Yi Shiwen's figure suddenly disappeared. Only a thunderous sound could be heard. Yi Shiwen directly passed through the void and appeared directly behind Archbishop Shuya. Then, he transformed into Sky Flipping Seal and blasted it down on the spot. Sky Flipping Seal seemed to be turning the sky upside down, and it pressed down directly. Boom! It directly hit the back of Archbishop Shuya's head, and he staggered on the spot. Archbishop Shuya's blood-colored hair flew around, and his whole body looked disheveled. He looked very embarrassed. Although Yi Shiwen's Sky Flipping Seal did not seriously injure him, it also made him embarrassed. He roared, opened his mouth, and roared out a blood-colored beam of light that blasted toward Yi Shiwen. Rumble! The blood-colored beam of light tore a huge crack in the sky and spread toward Yi Shiwen. Everyone cried out in alarm. It seemed as if Yi Shiwen would be killed in the next second. Swish! With a loud thunder, Yi Shiwen simply disappeared directly in the sky, dodging the attack by a hair's breadth. Blood Pressure Archbishop was frightened. His strength was very tyrannical. Although he was not the most tyrannical existence, and even the Great Sage realm had some tricks, he was already a genuine Great Sage after all. However, he, a genuine Great Sage, could not do anything to this damn guy in front of him. Moreover, he was completely in a passive position. If he was not careful, he might really die. Thinking of this, he felt a chill all over his body. Damn kid, go to hell! He roared and turned into a huge blood crow, which was as huge as a mountain, and flew into the sky. A mass of blood chi was released from Blood Crow Archbishop's body like a wave, instantly drowning the entire void. He wanted to force Yi Shiwen out. He was completely furious, and he wanted to use all means to kill Yi Shiwen. Swish! It didn't force Yi Shiwen out. Instead, a sword chi swept out and swept across the void. However, a loud scream was heard. The huge sea of blood was split open, and the sword chi directly swept towards the blood crow's body. The wings of this huge blood crow were cut off on the spot. Blood splashed hundreds of feet high and fell to the ground. The huge blood crow also screamed and turned back into Archbishop Shuya. Although he cultivated this kind of evil technique, he was not a real blood crow after all. So, after being severely injured, he would still turn back into a human form. Everyone was completely shocked. This Archbishop Shui had great achievements and had already stepped into the ranks of the strongest in the world. However, he was so embarrassed under Yi Shiwen's attack. He was almost killed by Yi Shiwen directly. If he had not dodged in time, he might have died on the spot. Archbishop Shui held a long spear in one hand and retreated repeatedly, staring at Yi Shiwen. Want to leave? Where do you think you're going? Yi Shiwen sneered and chased directly. At this time, the other elite masters of the Blood Crow Church surrounded Yi Shiwen. They wanted to delay Yi Shiwen's footsteps. They wanted to kill Yi Shiwen as a group. He was just a warrior of the Xiantian realm. No matter how powerful he was, could he fight against all of them? Idiot, burial sword. The angel's sword in Yi Shiwen's hand erupted and instantly condensed into a huge light sword. The light sword boiled in the sky and instantly surged out, forming countless sword shadows, and directly slashed down. Puff, puff, puff. These elite masters of Blood Crow Archbishop, who rushed over, could not stop Yi Shiwen's footsteps at all. They were slashed into a cloud of blood mist by the angel's sword and exploded in the air. The sky was raining blood. It looked extremely bloody. Archbishop Shui's eyes were wide open and he felt that he was about to vomit blood. He never thought that one day he would be so miserable. The only remaining elite of their Blood Crow Archbishop was killed by Yi Shiwen with a sword. It was almost like the 10,000 swords returned to origin. It was so strong that it did not seem like a martial art of the mortal world. Roar! He roared like a beast. He held a long spear and swept out a shocking long blood-red light. It instantly turned into a sea of blood and fell towards Yi Shiwen majestically. Chapter 23-24. Buried Heaven's Sword. Another majestic light swept up. It grew bigger and bigger in the sky and directly swept down. Boom! There was another huge collision. The energy frenzy swept in all directions and rolled back. In an instant, only a roar could be heard. Then, the spear in Archbishop Shui's hand instantly bounced off, and then instantly turned into powder. It turned into bloody powder. Originally, the quality of his spear was far inferior to the angel's sword. If it wasn't for Yi Shiwen's inferior skill, perhaps he would be slashed in the first exchange. However, after a few collisions, his body was already full of scars and completely shattered on the spot. Yi Shiwen's sword light did not reduce its momentum and directly slashed on Archbishop Shui's body. Archbishop Shui screamed and was also slashed in half. Blood directly splashed out on the spot. Everyone kept quiet out of fear and watched helplessly as Yi Shiwen single-handedly destroyed the invincible Blood Crow cult that had done all kinds of evil deeds with a single sword strike. Even if there were any remnants left, they couldn't make any big waves under the situation where most of the elites were annihilated again. Could be said that almost all of them were killed. Many people couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. Originally, the Blood Crow cult had been cultivating and recuperating for many years. It could be said that they had recovered to a considerable extent. One could know it just by looking at the emergence of another archbishop. However, he was still killed on the spot by Yi Shiwen alone. This person is actually not a human, but a monster. This thought suddenly popped up in many people's minds. Otherwise, they couldn't figure out how an innate realm master could kill a great sage. It was simply unimaginable. Xiantian, in the eyes of the people present, this level was not considered as a big deal, but now it had erupted with a shocking strength. Even Liao Liren, who was originally talking and laughing with Yi Shiwen, had a speechless expression on his face and didn't know what to say. Yi Shiwen kept the angel's sword and slowly walked in front of Gao Shuexian. He touched Gao Shuexian's little head and looked at her little face that was a little frightened, but she still forced herself to remain calm. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but sigh in his heart. If it was an ordinary child, she would have been scared to death seeing such a killing scene. However, Gao Shuexian didn't. Instead, she forcefully maintained her composure. This was already very difficult for her. Yi Shiwen asked, "Are you Gao Shuexian?" "Yes, Shaoxian Greet Senior." Gao Shuexian immediately knelt down and kowtowed. "Senior, you killed these demons from the Blood Crow sect and saved our pilgrimage palace from danger. I am extremely grateful." Yi Shiwen looked at the little girl's face. She should have known nothing at this age. She should have lived a carefree life. However, she had been forced to know too much. Perhaps because there were too many generations between them, his appearance did not look too similar to Gao Qingye's. However, the stubbornness between his brows was almost exactly the same. "Thank you for your help, Senior." The Internal Affairs Elder immediately knelt down and said. At this moment, the dignity of a great sect was no longer needed. Nothing was more important than surviving. He was even prepared to perish together with the demons of the Blood Crow cult. He did not expect to survive. Yi Shiwen accepted the two's kowtows. Regardless of age or seniority, he was indeed the grandmaster of these two. "If I wasn't here just now, were you prepared to activate the formation and perish together with the demons of the Blood Crow cult?" Yi Shiwen asked. Although he did not attack immediately, he had a panoramic view of everything that happened in the field. "Do you know that she is the last descendant of Gao Qingye? Where there's life, there's hope. You should understand this principle. If she was still alive, she could naturally make a comeback. However, she has reopened the gate and attracted the enemy. If Gao Qingye's bloodline is cut off because of this, you won't be able to absolve yourself even if you die 100 times. Yi Shiwen's aura erupted. There was a kind of indescribable majesty. He clearly felt that the person in front of him was not strong, but he still gave him a feeling that he was an ant. "Senior, please don't blame Grandpa Yin. This is my request," Gao Shuexian said unhurriedly. Although she was young, her speech was clear. "Our pilgrimage palace has flourished in the hands of Grandpa. It is an outstanding talent of the human race. Now that it has been breached, I should work hard to cultivate and bring glory to the pilgrimage palace in the future. However, when I escaped from the pilgrimage palace previously, I was already seriously injured. I'm afraid that I don't have much time left. Therefore, I begged Grandpa Yin to bring me back. Our pilgrimage palace has flourished in the hands of Grandpa. I can't let it perish silently. Even if I die, I want to be as brilliant as the summer flowers." The surrounding people were amazed. Gao Shuexian had such a clear mind at such a young age. Such a talent was extraordinary. If she could grow up normally, she would probably be another young genius of the generation. However, such a young girl was seriously injured now. She might not have long to live. The heavens were really jealous of her. This can't be. Senior Gao has worked hard for the development of our human race. She shouldn't end up like this. How could this happen? Damn it. The pilgrimage palace was extremely glorious in the past. However, it also made too many enemies. Sigh, the tea cools when the people are gone. It's nothing more than this. Yi Shiwen looked at Gao Shuexian. On the surface, there wasn't the slightest difference. However, Yi Shiwen could still feel that Gao Shuexian's breathing was much weaker than that of an ordinary child. It seemed that she was seriously injured. He opened the eyes of redemption and immediately saw that many meridians in Gao Shuexian's body were broken. Her muscles were also cracked everywhere. Her internal organs were constantly bleeding. She must have been attacked by a great master in the battle 2 years ago. It was incredible that she could survive until now. If Yi Shiwen's main body was here, it would only take a thought to heal her. However, he was only a clone now. Although he also knew the Phoenix regeneration technique, it would take a considerable amount of time to heal others. Moreover, it was such a fatal injury. However, it was fortunate that she encountered him. Otherwise, she would be dead if it was someone else. Her entire body had been injured to this extent. It was absolutely hopeless. Otherwise, Gao Shuexian wouldn't have come back. "Aren't you afraid of death?" Yi Shiwen looked at Gao Shuexian, who was kneeling on the ground, and said, "My death is near. It doesn't matter whether I'm afraid or not, because it doesn't help." Gao Shuexian said calmly. Her body, which was originally trembling because of the massacre, had also stabilized. "Many people who have lived for thousands of years are not as open-minded as you," Yi Shiwen said with a smile. "Many people who were about to die would do things that ordinary people couldn't imagine. Cornered dog would jump over a wall." This was the truth. Yi Shiwen looked at Gao Shuexian with admiration. It was a pity. If he hadn't already accepted Gao Qingye as his disciple, it would be a mess if he accepted Gao Shuexian. He really had the intention to accept Gao Shuexian. Unlike the cute and naive Li Ye, Gao Shuexian had seen too much and experienced too much, so she was more mature. However, since Gao Shuexian was the descendant of Gao Qingye, she was naturally his grand disciple. There was no difference. "Do you know why I saved you?" Yi Shiwen looked at Gao Shuexian and the internal elder and asked. "I don't know." Gao Shuexian shook her head. It wasn't just the two of them who had this question. Even the hundreds of individual cultivators who came to help were a little puzzled. Where did this monster come from? Why did he help the sacred palace? One should know that the sacred palace had offended a lot of people. This time, it could be seen that there were too many people who wanted them dead. The Blood Crow cult was just the vanguard and a gun that was ordered by others. Some people didn't want to bear this infamy, so they acquiesced to the Blood Crow cult's actions. "Because I'm Gao Qingye's master," Yi Shiwen said lightly. Everyone was stunned on the spot, especially Gao Shuexian. She had never thought that she would get such an answer. This young man who looked like he was only in the innate realm was actually Gao Qingye's master. How was this possible? Everyone present was in an uproar. They couldn't believe it. In the past hundreds of years, there had never been any news that Gao Qingye had such a master. It should be said that such a master didn't exist at all. Many people knew that Gao Qingye was self-taught. He had inadvertently obtained the inheritance of an ancient great power. That was how he rose to prominence in the Great Cataclysm and became a great figure who led the human race. But now, someone suddenly appeared and said that he was Gao Qingye's master. How could they believe it? But they couldn't find any reason to object, because there was really nothing to plot in the sacred palace now. The sacred palace had been breached, and all kinds of things had been taken away by the Demon Beast Legion and the people who came later to take advantage of the situation. Now there were only two people left, one old and one young. There was nothing to plot at all. What benefits could they get by pretending to be Gao Qingye's master? "I'm now announcing to the world that the sacred palace will be rebuilt. If there's any dissatisfaction or want to settle old scores, feel free to come and find me." Yi Shiwen glanced at the crowd and said. He didn't believe that all these people were here to help. There must be spies from various forces among them. After all, the rebuilding of the sacred palace was a big event. It was impossible for them to be unresponsive. Even if they didn't come in person, they would send someone to take a look. "Within this month, if you want to cause trouble, feel free to come. I'm very grateful that everyone came to help. Go and rest first. Tonight I will personally receive everyone," Yi Shiwen said faintly. Then, he looked at Gao Shuexian and the Internal Affairs Elder and said, "Both of you, come with me." Gao Shuexian and the Internal Affairs Elder looked at each other, then followed Yi Shiwen into the mountain gate. As everyone said, they had nothing to plot. If he wanted to harm them, he didn't have to do this. He could just ignore it. "I'll update more tomorrow. I had a bad headache last night. Today I went to check it. It was said that I had high blood pressure. I often felt headache and dizzy before, and my whole body was weak because of this. My blood pressure was as high as 150. It was said that living such a life of reversing day and night was too stressful for the body. In addition, I have some internal injuries. I must regulate my life in the future and exercise more. Otherwise, I'll be finished before I reach 30 years old." However, I didn't think it was a big deal at first. If I didn't get excited, I wouldn't feel dizzy. However, since I knew that I had high blood pressure, the pressure in my heart skyrocketed. I kept thinking about when I was going to die. I felt dizzy all the time. Finally, sleep early and wake up early. I'll update more tomorrow. Chapter 23-25. Yi Shiwen didn't care about the outsiders guessing the authenticity of his identity because it was unnecessary. However, he must let Gao Shuexian and the internal elder know his identity. They went directly into the depths of the mountain gate. Yi Shiwen scanned around with his divine senses and confirmed that there was no one around. Then, he took out a token. Gao Shuexian was still a little confused, but the internal elder suddenly became excited because he recognized this token. It was the token of the head of the sect. Moreover, it was the token of the first-generation head of the sect. It was taken along with Gao Qingye when he ascended. Later, the second-generation head of the sect forged another token to show his respect to Gao Qingye. It was already different from the token of the first-generation head. Others could be counterfeited, but this token could not be counterfeited because Gao Qingye's divine senses were still left on it. He could immediately distinguish it. He looked at Yi Shiwen in shock. Was he really Gao Qingye's master? How was this possible? Everyone knew that Gao Qingye was self-taught. He didn't have a master at all. However, the cataclysm was so chaotic that a lot of historical materials had been lost. It was not impossible for Gao Qingye to have a master. The most important thing was that there was nothing to plot in the current pilgrimage palace. There were only a few insignificant people. All kinds of ancient martial arts secret books had long been taken away. There was no value left. Could it be Yi Shiwen put away the token and said, "This was given to me by Gao Qingye. He asked me to take care of the pilgrimage palace. I didn't expect such a thing to happen." Xiao Xian pays respect to master. Gao Shuexian didn't think too much. She kowtowed on the spot. "Get up," Yi Shiwen said and helped Gao Shuexian up. "Your injuries are too serious. I can't cure you in a short time. However, you should be able to recover in 3 to 5 years if you follow me." Gao Shuexian and the internal elder were completely stunned. It was as if they had heard the most incredible thing. They were already disheartened, especially Gao Shuexian. She was barely suppressing her injuries. She wasn't lying when she said that she didn't have much time left. However, the master in front of them had a way to cure her. Who would want to die if they could be cured? They naturally didn't want to die. "Let me treat you first and stabilize your injuries." Yi Shiwen stretched out his hand and placed it on Gao Shuexian's forehead. Both of them faintly heard the cry of a phoenix. Then, a warm torrent of energy poured into Gao Shuexian's body. Gao Shuexian's body was on the verge of collapsing. However, it miraculously stopped collapsing. In the past 2 years they had tried everything they could think of. They had even secretly sought out some trustworthy masters who were on good terms with the pilgrimage palace. However, none of them could treat Gao Shuexian's injuries. Being able to keep her alive for the time being was already the best they could do. However, they didn't know how those mortal techniques could be compared with Yi Shiwen's god-level power technique. However, in just a short period of time, they had already begun to believe in this excessively young grandmaster. At the very least, he had stabilized Gao Shuexian's injuries. Moreover, this grandmaster's strength was even more eye-catching. If this went on, it might really be possible to rebuild the pilgrimage palace. "Let's go and meet the guests with Grandmaster." Yi Shiwen took Gao Shuexian's hand and walked out. As night fell, the entire pilgrimage mountain was lit up by various lights and electricity. It was as bright as daytime. A banquet was set up in the huge square. Various servants were shuttling back and forth. People who came to help were toasting and exchanging toasts. It was a joyous occasion. Although the pilgrimage palace had been breached, it still had enough money to hire these servants even if there was only a little bit of foundation left. However, although everyone was toasting and exchanging toasts, they would still pay attention to Yi Shiwen and the others who had yet to appear on the main seat from time to time. During the day, Yi Shiwen killed the people of the Blood Crow cult in a stunning manner. He slaughtered all their elite. Even the Archbishop of the Blood Crow cult died in his hands. The whole world was shocked. Although they didn't go out now, they could imagine how shocked the outside world was. When did such a terrifying master appear in the pilgrimage palace? He was actually Gao Qingye's master. When did Gao Qingye have a master? If he had a master, how powerful would he be? It was unimaginable how tyrannical his cultivation would be if he lived to this day. However, what made them depressed was that they couldn't remember what Yi Shiwen looked like no matter how hard they tried. They couldn't even draw a picture. Even the video recorded by the camera was blurry, as if someone was interfering with the signal. They clearly saw Yi Shiwen's appearance, but when they really tried to recall it, it was as if they were censored. They couldn't remember it at all. However, they didn't know that this was Yi Shiwen's intention. He didn't want to be discovered so quickly and fall into endless trouble. Therefore, he isolated the surrounding space with the power of redemption. Therefore, although everyone could see him, it was a blur when they really recalled it. It was even more impossible for those electronic devices to really take a picture of his appearance. However, everyone could still imagine that the outside world was now completely stirred up. As long as there was such an existence in the pilgrimage palace who could easily kill a great sage, no one would dare to underestimate him. Finally, they waited for Yi Shiwen's appearance. He appeared in front of everyone with Gao Shuexian, and the internal affairs elder was responsible for some overall planning work. Now that Yi Shiwen was here, he naturally didn't have to be careful all the time. "Greetings, senior." Everyone stood up and said with their fists cupped. Although they didn't know the true origin of Yi Shiwen and didn't know if he was really Gao Qingye's master, everyone dared not underestimate him based on his strength alone. "You guys sit down," said Yi Shiwen, sitting on the main seat with Gao Shuexian. He glanced at the crowd and said, "No matter what, the pilgrimage palace is in great trouble today. I am very grateful that the Lord can come and help." No, Senior is too polite. Senior Gao is a benefactor to the human race. "We are just doing what we should do," said Liao Liren quickly in a loud voice. At this time, he didn't dare to call Yi Shiwen's name directly, but replaced it with Senior. "That's right. The pilgrimage palace shouldn't end here. We can't let Senior Gao be disappointed in the heaven realm. We just lifted a finger. Senior, you don't have to be so polite. Moreover, we didn't help much in the end," said someone. Many people were a little embarrassed. As that person said, in the end, it was actually Yi Shiwen who eliminated the masters of the Blood Crow cult in one fell swoop. If it was just them alone, even if they fought to the death, it would be difficult to escape the fate of being destroyed by the Blood Crow cult. After all, there was no possibility of them surviving the attack of a great sage. For you, it's just lifting a finger, but in the end, you still came to help our pilgrimage palace. We, the pilgrimage palace, are absolutely not ungrateful people." As Yi Shiwen said, he waved his hand directly. There was only the sound of phoenix cries in the sky. In an instant, hundreds of phoenixes flew out, and then with amazing momentum, they submerged into everyone's body. Before everyone could react, they only felt a warm current circulating in their body. Then, they found that the internal injuries that existed in their body were also recovering at an amazing speed. Many of them were old injuries, but in the blink of an eye they had almost recovered. Everyone had a strange expression, and then a burst of incomparable surprise. When they looked at Yi Shiwen again, there was a somewhat incredulous expression in their eyes. In fact, many of them were old injuries that couldn't be cured at all. They had thought of many ways to solve it, but there was no way to solve it. They didn't expect Yi Shiwen to solve it immediately. It was simply incredible. What kind of martial technique was this? It was so magical. Moreover, he was able to treat hundreds of people in one breath. This kind of skill was simply unimaginable. Everyone no longer dared to doubt Yi Shiwen. What Xiantian Peak and so on, he was probably using it to deceive people. Although they did not know why Yi Shiwen did this, but it was far from being a match for them. It was naturally impossible to do it with Yi Shiwen's current strength alone. Most of it was relying on the hidden spirit crystals to support such consumption. Thank you, Senior. Thank you, Senior. This junior is very grateful. My injuries are really healed, really healed. I have been tortured for more than 100 years, and there is no way to cure it. Thank you, Senior. Thank you, Senior. Everyone bowed their heads one after another. Many old injuries had been torturing them until now. Many of them might have hurt the deepest part of their body, and it couldn't be cured at all. Suffering from these old injuries day after day was a normal warrior. It was said that the lifespan of a warrior could easily reach hundreds or thousands of years, but in fact it was only rare for a warrior to live to that age safely. These old injuries that couldn't be cured would also shorten one's lifespan. No matter what they had originally thought, at this moment, all of them were sincerely thankful to him. You're welcome. It's just a little effort. Yi Shiwen tried to pretend that it was just a little effort. However, it really didn't consume too much of his energy. After all, they weren't like Gao Shuexian, whose bodily functions were on the verge of being cut off. They only had some chronic illnesses and not serious illnesses. At this moment, an incomparably huge roar came from the sky. Bang! A huge bombardment sounded. The huge mountain gate was shaken, as if it had been hit by some meteorite. An expert has come to attack. Suddenly, everyone reacted at once. Such a huge movement naturally couldn't be an earthquake. Moreover, the direction of the shaking was wrong. It was the array that had been set up at the outermost periphery. Originally, the array hadn't been activated in order to attract the remnants of the Blood Crow cult. Now, the array had naturally been activated. It was impossible for the Blood Crow cult to directly attack the mountain gate. Chapter 23-26. Even the entire mountain gate was shaken amidst the huge explosion. A series of explosions was heard, and it seemed as if the protective matrix of the mountain was about to be broken. Everyone looked at Yi Shiwen to see how he would deal with the founder of the pilgrimage palace, who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Yi Shiwen's eyes turned and swept across the void. The power of redemption was lingering in his eyes. It looked mysterious and noble. Nothing in the void could hide from his eyes at a glance. Sneaky clowns! Clang! As soon as Yi Shiwen's voice fell, the angel's sword suddenly appeared in his hand. It suddenly flew into the sky, and instantly turned into a 1,000-feet-long waterfall, sweeping out in the void. Rumble! There was a violent explosion sound. Several figures were cut in half and fell directly. Everyone could see clearly that these figures were glowing with a kind of silver light under the moonlight. After a closer look, they realized that their bodies were covered with silver-white long hair. They turned out to be hair zombies. The invaders are not real people, but zombies. Hiss, it seems that they are not ordinary zombies. They are zombies of the Sage Realm. The physical bodies of the experts of the Sage Realm are close to perfection. Even if they die in battle, the probability of turning into zombies is not high. Where did they get so many zombies of the Sage Realm? The news has already spread. They clearly know that ordinary great sages are not Senior Ye's opponents, but they still sent Sage Realm experts. Is this just a test? Everyone, keep your spirits up. Maybe we will need to take action later. Liao Liren shouted. Among the hundreds of people present, most of them were legendary true experts. However, there was no lack of existences of the Sage Realm. Most of them had received the favor of the pilgrimage palace in the past. Many people were on guard. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes. He had already figured it out. It seemed that this was just a test. Using zombies of the Sage Realm as a test meant that the invaders were very generous. Moreover, it seemed that they were determined to win. However, he still underestimated himself. Yi Shiwen didn't care. He let the angel's sword fly in the air and patrol automatically, as if there was a powerful angel guarding the mountain gate. Don't be nervous, it's just a bunch of clowns. Let's continue eating, Yi Shiwen said with a smile. Gao Shuexian was the one who showed the most respect. She was the first to slowly eat the food in front of her. Seeing that Gao Shuexian was doing the same, the others slowly relaxed. After all, the two people in charge didn't care, so why would they care? Not long after, another person appeared in the void. However, before he could make a move, he was slashed by the angel's sword and turned into pieces. Someone looked over and immediately cried out in shock. It's an ancient puppet. These puppets are different from modern mechas. They were created by ancient cultivators and are extremely powerful. However, they are rarely seen nowadays, and I've never heard of anyone using them on a large scale. They're actually being used to test the waters. How extravagant! It's obvious that they're not from the same group. It's really the calm before the storm. Many people began to feel nervous. Everyone realized that the opponents they would face would not be as simple as they thought. However, the senior's ancient sword isn't simple either. I'm afraid that it surpasses the divine tools used by the ascended experts. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to kill a sage expert in an instant with just a little tool spirit that has been awakened. Yes, with such a divine tool in hand, it doesn't matter how many sage experts come. Even great sages will find it difficult to escape unscathed. If they can't think of a way to contend with it, I'm afraid that they'll only be limited to testing the waters today. That's not necessarily true. Perhaps there really is someone who can bring an ancient magical artifact to contend against your ancient sword. You should know that in the distant past, Earth once had a very powerful inheritance. There were even many gods in the legends. Not all the myths in the ancient legends are fake. There are also many ancient divine tools left from the distant past. Yes, the purple and green twin swords of Mount Shu, the Tai Chi sword of Wudong, and the Kunlun sect have countless divine tools. Even the pilgrimage palace used to have an ancient divine tool. But if that's the case, then I'm afraid that they won't rest until one of them is dead. Damn it, are they not willing to let go of the last bloodline of the pilgrimage palace? Do they have the face to call themselves a famous sect if they're so ruthless? They can't afford to lose all decorum, so they didn't dare to show up. They're just testing the waters now. However, the power of the angel's sword wasn't just for show. It had killed a sage expert in succession, so it gave everyone great confidence. Otherwise, even the matrix would have been broken by others. Next, there were several more tests. Even the most powerful military mecha appeared in the ranks of the tests. Of course, it didn't mean that the military's mecha had appeared. The government's military had appeared in the encirclement and suppression. It was just that the major forces had eyes and ears everywhere. It wasn't surprising that the military was still experimenting with mechas. They even had their own research institutions. The mechas they built were not inferior to the technical level of the military. However, in the end, they couldn't break through the defense of the angel's sword. They were instantly destroyed. Yi Shiwen didn't even intend to capture a few people alive. He beheaded them all. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Yi Shiwen finally opened his mouth and said in a clear voice, "I've been watching for so long. Whatever means you have, just use it. This kind of test is meaningless to me." Yi Shiwen's words spread further and further like a loudspeaker. His voice had reached thousands of miles. The real qi in Yi Shiwen's body was also emptied. This time, he used his own power, but in an instant, he almost recovered with the Phoenix regeneration technique. He felt that the Xiantian realm alone was not enough. He must improve his cultivation and further promote to the truth realm. When this matter was over, he would spend a day to break through. If people knew about this, they would be depressed to the point of vomiting blood. For ordinary people, entering the truth realm from the Sciention realm was like passing through the gates of hell. The truth realm began to generate its own magical power. Many unreasonable things could be done in the truth realm. It was very difficult. Many people were stuck in the Sciention realm for their entire lives and couldn't break through. Yi Shiwen spent a day to break through. How could this not make people crazy? Bang! There was a violent fluctuation in the void, and a vast coercion surged and directly bombarded the entire mountain gate. Someone is bombarding us with an ancient instrument. The entire mountain gate was shaking, and everyone was shaken to the ground. Everyone was shocked, and they all flew into the air, releasing their true essence to resist the power of this vibration. A terrifying power surged like a vast ocean and directly blasted through the entire world. If not for the protection of the angel's sword, the entire mountain gate would have been turned into ashes. After going through a great calamity, there were not many arrays left, otherwise it would not have been so easy to break through. Countless beams of light surged in the void like the Milky Way falling from the 9 heavens. Divine light splashed everywhere, and the sky seemed to be cooked by a powerful force. Countless deep blue flames turned into sparks and fell down. Oh my God, what is that? Isn't that the water-moon ring of the Holy Palace? Someone suddenly recognized the ancient instrument that was attacking the mountain gate. An incomparably huge silver ring was growing bigger and bigger in the sky. It was spewing out many blue flames. Yes, it is the water-moon ring. Gao Shuexian's small face tightened as she stared at the water-moon ring. That's the water-moon ring left by my grandfather. However, it was lost 2 years ago. Yi Shiwen looked at the sky and saw the water-moon ring that was constantly displaying its power. It turned out to be Gao Qingye's instrument. This instrument had reached the level of a Xian tool. No wonder it had such power. However, it was impossible to display the true power of the water-moon ring when a group of great sage experts or people who hadn't even reached the great sage realm were controlling it. Since it is ours, then we must take it back. Yi Shiwen waved his hand and the angel's sword flew into his hand. He flew all the way up and said, "Since you are here, then come out and meet me. I just want to ask, do you hate the Holy Palace that much? Do you have to be so ruthless? Time flies. The Holy Palace has long lost its meaning of existence. You can't keep it. Why are you so painstakingly searching for it?" A low and gloomy voice came. No one knew where it came from. There were terrifying fluctuations coming from afar. "Do you dare to come out and say this to me?" Yi Shiwen looked at the void with an incomparably firm look in his eyes. "You are so timid. Do you think you are qualified to talk to me about this? Junior, don't think that you are so great. With your cultivation, you dare to pretend to be Gao Qingye's master. It is ridiculous." Suddenly, 7 figures appeared in the void. They were 7 strangely shaped old men. They were dressed in simple robes. Their bodies were bursting with powerful auras. Xia Qingshan's 7 devils. It's them. I didn't expect that the water-moon ring would fall into their hands. These 7 people have strange tempers. At the same time, their cultivation is powerful. The eldest of the Xia Qingshan's 7 devils has the cultivation of a great sage. The other 6 also have the cultivation of the sage realm peak. "What grievances do you have with the Holy Palace?" Yi Shiwen asked. "I heard that Gao Qingye has left behind the inheritance of the ancient practitioners. My brothers and I have been cultivating so hard that we can ascend to the heaven realm one day. I think if Gao Qingye was here, he would not disagree. Isn't he known for being extremely righteous and broad-minded? As long as we see the inheritance, we will immediately retreat and never stay. What do you think?" Xia Qingshan's 7 devils said. "The inheritance of the ancient practitioners that grandfather learned has long been transformed into the inheritance of the Holy Palace. Now, the martial arts books have already been emptied. How can there be any left? Gao Shuexian's face was red as she said childishly. Chapter 23-27. We don't care about that. The boss of Xiaqingshan's 7 devils waved his hand directly and said, Humph, you want to deceive us with this kind of trick? If we can't get it today, we won't just leave like this. Humph, do you think you can leave? I don't want to say anything more to you. Since the Water Moon treasure ring belongs to the sacred palace, it shouldn't be something that you can control. Yi Shiwen roared. A terrifying energy rushed out of the ring and rushed into his body. Then everyone only saw that a stream of energy was constantly boiling inside his body, growing higher and higher. His strength also rushed to the truth realm in an instant, and in the next second, rushed to the legendary realm, the sage realm, the great sage realm, and continued to grow stronger. A terrifying power swept out, and endless golden light was released from his body. This was a kind of peerless power. In an instant, the power suppressed the whole place. The originally arrogant Xiaqingshan's 7 devils were instantly deterred. This was a kind of supreme majesty that shocked people. In Yi Shiwen's eyes, there was the power of redemption flashing. A part of the power in the ring was completely controlled by him. Great Sage Peak, no more and no less. Although it was not as strong as when he was in the deity, it was enough for now. They didn't know Yi Shiwen's situation. They only thought that Yi Shiwen was hiding his strength. Previously, he was so powerful when he was only in the innate realm. Now that he had recovered to the Great Sage Peak, he was almost the strongest power in the mortal world. What was there to worry about? Even if you are also a great sage, we brothers are not to be trifled with. The eyes of the boss of Xiaqingshan's 7 devils were as cold as ice. After experiencing the initial panic, he had completely recovered at this time. The rest of Xiaqingshan's 7 devils also reacted one after another after hearing his words. Yeah, what's there to be afraid of? They had dealt with many great sages in the past. So what? They were also people at the peak of the sage realm. In the human world, they could be regarded as first class. Naturally, they calmed down quickly. Although I don't know where you are from, you still want to pretend to be Gao Qingye's master? You are still far from it. So what if you're really his master? Gao Qingye has already ascended, let alone you. You're already so old. This is no longer your era. Since we're here today, we can't leave empty-handed. This concerns our great cause of ascension. We'll take the lives of anyone who dares to stop us. These Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks were talking at the same time. They were getting more and more arrogant, and they were filled with endless killing intent. Everyone could tell that they had come prepared this time. The 7 of them were at least at the peak of the sage realm. Some of them even had the terrifying killing intention of great sage realm experts. So, they had shrouded the entire mountain gate. How could those ordinary female servants who had been invited here withstand such coercion? They instantly vomited blood and were almost crushed to death. How arrogant! You want to ascend to the immortal realm with your petty tricks? How ridiculous! Yi Shiwen couldn't help but sneer. His eyes were ice-cold as if he was looking at a group of dead people. Don't be so arrogant. You think you can stop us by yourself? So what if you can? Do you think we're the only ones who want to destroy the pilgrimage palace today? We have plenty of people. As long as you hand over the inheritance, we can leave. The leader of the Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks erupted with a bone-chilling killing intent. He rushed towards Yi Shiwen, and actually materialized to kill Yi Shiwen on the spot. The killing intent on their bodies was earth-shattering. A terrifying coercion swept out like a vast ocean. It instantly collapsed and swept away everything. How dare you show off your insignificant skills in front of me? At this time, Yi Shiwen finally moved. He broke through the coercion and killing intent in an instant. Then, he took a step forward firmly and forcefully. It was as if he had stepped on everyone's hearts in an instant, giving them the illusion that their hearts had stopped beating. It was incomparably terrifying. Don't play trick. Watch me break your martial arts. One of the Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks stepped forward and attacked directly. The cultivation of the peak of the sage realm was directly spread out. Such cultivation was indeed not ordinary. Laws erupted from his body, forming a network. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen did not use the angel's sword. The angel's sword had been held up by the water moon treasure ring operated by the Xiaqingshan's 7 freak. In their opinion, Yi Shiwen was not that terrifying without the angel's sword. Therefore, they were not afraid at all. Even if they were only at the peak of the sage realm, they still dared to attack Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen directly raised his hand and slapped down. All the law network collapsed in an instant. The Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks of the sage realm had no time to react. He was directly slapped by Yi Shiwen and died tragically on the spot. His entire body exploded in the air. How is this possible? Impossible. I must be seeing things. Everyone was shocked. Yi Shiwen's cultivation and combat power were really ridiculously strong. Even an ordinary great sage could not give such a terrifying pressure to everyone. It made everyone feel a kind of horror like death. Idiot, I have said that you dare to show off your insignificant skills in front of me. The result of showing off in front of an expert is death, Yi Shiwen said slowly. Everyone had heard his voice. Everyone was trembling. They couldn't believe everything that had happened. Yi Shiwen's dreadfulness had completely exceeded their imagination even without the help of the angel's sword. He had easily killed a senior expert of the Sage Peak realm. At this time, the Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks finally understood that they seemed to have provoked a monster. A monster that could not be provoked. Not good. Retreat. The Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks of the Sage Realm Peak originally wanted to follow up. At this moment, they wanted to retreat and did not dare to stand in front of Yi Shiwen. But how could Yi Shiwen give them such a chance? His palm directly transformed into the overturning sky seal. The world collapsed instantly. The overturning sky seal fell down fiercely and directly fell on the body of the Xiaqingshan's 7 freak. He spurted a mouthful of blood on the spot. His body was instantly torn apart. He could not stop Yi Shiwen at all. Don't worry, everyone. The boss of the Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks forcibly calmed down and said, he is definitely not using his original cultivation. Otherwise, why didn't he manifest it at the beginning? He must have used some secret technique. He certainly can't hold on for too long. How do you know that I'm not pretending to lure you? Yi Shiwen said with a faint smile. He would never admit that he was right. He wanted to shock everyone in one breath. The rest of the Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks were suddenly shocked. It was indeed so. There was such a possibility. They originally thought that Yi Shiwen was relying on the angel's sword to be so fierce. Now that they thought about it, they were too naive. How could Yi Shiwen dare to be so arrogant only by relying on the angel's sword? Yi Shiwen said faintly, from the moment you dared to appear, it has already been decided that you will die. Even if the great principal golden deity descends to the world, no one can save you. Arrogant. One of the Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks said in shock and anger. Yi Shiwen's words had scared him. Then come and try. Yi Shiwen's voice just fell. He took a step and instantly appeared in front of him. He did not have time to react. He saw that Yi Shiwen had already appeared in front of him. Then, the overturning sky seal above his head was getting bigger and bigger. Boom! This figure was blown up by Yi Shiwen in the air, turning into a sky full of blood rain, falling from the sky. Another one died. Another one actually died. The Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks had a total of 7 people. Each of them was tyrannical, but their real horror was when the 7 of them joined forces. Even ordinary great sages would be defeated by them. They were not their opponents at all. But now, 3 people had died in one breath. The remaining few people seemed to be unable to hold on for long under Yi Shiwen's offensive. Swish! But only a thunderous sound was heard. Yi Shiwen appeared again in front of one of the Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks. The sword in his hand turned into a sword, and it pierced into the stomach of the Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks, killing him on the spot. No! The boss of the Xiaqingshan's 7 freaks was going crazy. Just like the Blood Crow Archbishop, he could only watch his subordinates being beheaded by Yi Shiwen. There was no way at all. Yi Shiwen's speed was too fast. Every time he wanted to stop, he found that Yi Shiwen had already beheaded him. Are you still not coming out? If you don't come out, I won't care anymore. He roared angrily at the darkness, as if there was someone hiding in there. He was just a pawn. He was originally happy to be a pawn of these people. Anyway, he only wanted to get what he wanted. Moreover, he had seized the Water Moon treasure ring. As long as there were still people alive in the Holy Palace, sooner or later, they would be a hidden danger, and they might come to trouble him at any time. So he was very happy to cut the weeds and eliminate the root. However, being a pawn did not mean being cannon fodder. Why are you in such a hurry? In the darkness there was an echo. A kind of ghostly atmosphere came from the void. Endless ghostly energy floated out, mixed with the smell of corpses, which made people want to vomit. Then they saw an old woman walking out of the darkness step by step. Under the light of the searchlight, everyone finally saw clearly that this was not a human. It was simply an evil ghost. An old woman with white hair walked forward step by step with the help of a cane. Her face was extremely old, and she seemed to have suffered some injuries. From a distance, she was simply like an evil ghost. Her muscles were bulging, and her body carried an unimaginable corpse energy. Is that the legendary evil ghost Granny? Someone took a deep breath, only feeling cold all over. Why is she here? So, she was the one who controlled the hairy zombies to attack previously. It's really scary. Chapter 23-28. At this moment, many people recalled the rumors about the evil ghost Granny. However, these rumors were clearly not good. Many of the rumors about the evil ghost Granny caused people's hair to stand on end when they heard them. The evil ghost Granny hadn't appeared for a long time. However, her reputation had skyrocketed. She had cultivated to an extremely high level in a short period of time. She had defeated many powerhouses of the older generation. However, many people thought that she might be someone from the older generation before the Great Cataclysm just by looking at her appearance. Moreover, it was rumored that the evil ghost Granny loved to drive zombies to fight. Everyone immediately understood the origin of those Sage Realm zombies. The sacred palace has been glorious for a while. Now, it's time for it to come to an end. This is in accordance with the will of the heavens. This is how it should be. The evil ghost Granny said slowly. Her voice was hoarse like that of an evil ghost. It made people shudder when they heard it. Why have you come? Yi Shiwen faintly asked. I've come to sever Gao Qingye's bloodline, the evil ghost Granny said with an evil grin. Her voice was even more unpleasant to hear. So, you and Gao Qingye have a personal grudge? Yi Shiwen's eyes were revolving with the power of salvation. It was enough to see through all the falsehoods in the world. The evil ghost Granny nodded and said, Yes, I've come to sever his bloodline. I liked him so much in the past. However, he didn't even spare a glance for me. He caused me to become like this. I'm neither a human nor a ghost. Now, I'm going to destroy the last of his bloodline in the human world with my own hands. Everyone could see that the evil ghost Granny had been a charming and beautiful woman in the past. However, she had become like this now. How many people had suffered because of love? Yi Shiwen smiled coldly and said, That's right. I've come to sever his bloodline. Yi Shiwen smiled coldly and said, Another narcissistic person. So what if he doesn't like you? Besides, you have already entered the evil path. Although I don't know where you obtained the ghost cultivation technique, but you want to forcibly practice the ghost cultivation technique as a human body, isn't that the same as courting death? Fortunately, you have a kind of system, which can ensure that you are neither dead nor alive. Otherwise, you would have died long ago. Evil Ghost Granny's complexion changed. She hadn't expected that Yi Shiwen would be able to see through her even though they had just met. Moreover, he seemed to have seen her in person. However, he didn't know that although Yi Shiwen didn't have the strength of his main body, but his martial arts knowledge and experience were still there. So, it wasn't difficult for him to see through these things. Although Yi Shiwen didn't know what kind of relationship he had with Gao Qingye, but it wasn't important. He just said, "You will die sooner or later if you continue to practice like this. I won't kill you today for the sake of the fate between you and him. Get out of here, otherwise don't blame me for being impolite." Ha 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 ha. Evil Ghost Granny laughed strangely, as if she had heard the funniest thing in the world. "Little kid, you want to pretend to be his master? What a joke. You can deceive others, but you can't deceive me. That old ghost is a self-taught genius. I've watched him become famous throughout the world. How could I not know whether he has a master or not? Although I don't know how you saw through my situation, but if you think you can rely on this to scare me away, then you're wrong. I don't have many years left to live, and I don't want to live anymore. But I'm not willing to give up. That old ghost can ascend to the heavenly realm, but I have to suffer day and night. So, I want him to remember me for all eternity. Whenever he thinks of me, his heart will ache." Ha 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 ha. Evil Ghost Granny laughed wildly. Her laughter shattered the clouds in the sky, and her withered body trembled. "You've already turned into a demon." Yi Shiwen sighed and said, "Being like this is also a kind of torture for you. I'll send you on your way." "You think you can do it?" Evil Ghost Granny laughed strangely, and directly grabbed out with her hand. In the void, long hair actually grew. It turned out that Evil Ghost Granny had refined her body into a zombie. Hair zombies originally had an extremely physique, but they still turned into a zombie. This was the fundamental reason why she could become a master in less than a few hundred years after Gao Qingye's ascension. The sky suddenly shattered, and in an instant, a powerful sound wave erupted. Many people couldn't bear it, and almost fell to their knees on the spot. Her aura suddenly rose to an extremely powerful level, and directly rushed towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. At this moment Yi Shiwen also made his move. Without fear, his arm turned into a holy sword, and he slashed out with the buried heaven sword. The sky was split open. Boundless divine power burst out from his body. Boom! Yi Shiwen's divine power spread out all the evils. In front of Yi Shiwen's pure yang power, the power was nothing at all. Evil Ghost Granny seemed to have encountered the most terrifying thing in the world, and her scream pierced through the sky. Yi Shiwen's divine power seemed to be burning her body. She retreated again, and continued to erupt with power to suppress Yi Shiwen's divine power. She looked at Yi Shiwen again, and her expression was incomparably shocked. She didn't expect Yi Shiwen's body to contain such an astonishing pure yang power. He was actually able to injure her. The holy mountain was shaking in such a collision, as if it would collapse at any time. Just the aftermath of such a confrontation could completely injure people. "You alone, no one can stop me from killing that vile spawn today," the Evil Ghost Granny screamed. Then, her body suddenly exploded. Her originally withered body slowly became plump, becoming extremely plump. In an instant it became an incomparably huge figure. It was the size of a small mountain. Her figure became taller and taller, but the gloomy aura around her became even denser. How is this possible? Is this the legendary magical power of the law of heaven and earth? Everyone was stunned by the huge ghostly figure, and an indescribable chill rushed from the soles of their feet to their heads, making them tremble involuntarily. This was an instinctive fear that came from the soul. However, Yi Shiwen activated the Eye of Redemption, and immediately saw what it was. It was the Evil Ghost Granny's zombie true body. She had already sacrificed her own body to become a zombie. It could be said that she wasn't ruthless. Otherwise, the yang energy in the body of a mortal couldn't be cultivated into a ghost cultivator. Even an extreme yin constitution would contain yang energy. It was just a matter of how much. However, a ghost cultivator had to completely transform their body into a yin attribute body. There was no other way other than becoming a zombie. This huge zombie looked up to the sky and let out an earth-shattering roar, as if it wanted to bring the entire Mars into its kingdom of the dead under its jurisdiction. Little kid, so what if you have the power of extreme yang? In this world, yang can subdue yin, but yin can also subdue yang. Evil ghost Granny laughed sinisterly. Then, she stretched out her huge hand and grabbed towards Yi Shiwen. I'm going to suck all the blood in your body to make up for my loss. The entire pilgrimage palace was trembling, as if it was going to completely collapse under this claw. Many people below felt a sharp piercing sound coming towards them, and their eardrums were about to shatter in an instant. The zombie that evil ghost Granny had turned into was too terrifying. As she had said, yang could subdue yin, and yin could subdue yang. Everything was uncertain, and it all depended on who was stronger. Everyone felt a suffocating feeling. In an instant, the sky was covered, and an oppressive aura filled everyone's heart. Insignificant skill. Although yin can subdue yang, or yang can subdue yin, you'll have to be stronger than me first. Yi Shiwen's arm transformed into a huge sword, and a sword light shot out. In an instant, evil ghost Granny let out a blood-curdling scream. Her ghostly claw was pierced through. She wasn't injured, but was pierced through. Yi Shiwen's swordsmanship cultivation had already reached a certain level. His main body had already condensed a swordsmanship incarnation, and his understanding of swordsmanship had also risen to the level of the laws. It was incomparably sharp, and it was instantly pierced through. Moreover, there was no way to recover in a short period of time. All kinds of laws were entangled in it. Although it couldn't compare to the power of the main body, it was still very powerful. Evil ghost Granny retracted her claw, and looked at Yi Shiwen with a sinister look. Your swordsmanship is very strong, but your strength isn't enough to display its full potential. After all, it's not your own strength. You're at the end of your rope. She laughed sinisterly, and covered her palm with yin qi. Then, she rushed forward and fought with Yi Shiwen again. Even though she was at a disadvantage, she didn't want to retreat. She had gone completely crazy. If she didn't kill Gao Shuexian, she wouldn't be able to rest in peace for the rest of her life. Die. She laughed sinisterly, and the yin qi on her body almost formed an armor on the surface of her body. Gusts of chilly wind blew, and she was like a real ghost king. She instantly pierced through everything, and her yin qi overflowed in all directions, wrapping around Yi Shiwen. She wanted to kill him on the spot, and within these gusts of chilly wind, there were countless malicious spirits that directly rushed into Yi Shiwen's divine sense. They wanted to turn Yi Shiwen into an idiot on the spot. Boom! A powerful force erupted from Yi Shiwen's body, and instantly destroyed these resentful spirits. All of them turned into green smoke. It was unknown how long this evil ghost Granny had been nurturing them, but now they were all killed by Yi Shiwen in a flash. Come! Yi Shiwen suddenly waved his hand, and the angel's sword, which was originally confronting the water moon treasure ring, suddenly fell into his hand. An astonishing sword light instantly burst out and traversed the vast sky. Poochie! The sword light swept across the vast sky, and pierced through everything on the spot. It pierced through the evil ghost Granny's body. This time, it wasn't her palm that was pierced, but her entire body. A terrifying power wreaked havoc in her body, and strangled her already weak spirit. Boom! Her huge body directly fell from the clouds, and she died tragically. Chapter 23-29. Evil Ghost Granny, who was so powerful that many people trembled in fear, died in the hands of Yi Shiwen. She didn't even have the upper hand from beginning to end. This was the most terrifying part. This was a complete suppression. Yi Shiwen didn't give her the slightest chance from beginning to end. This was the most terrifying part. In the eyes of many people, Yi Shiwen's strength had probably reached a shocking level. With such a tyrannical cultivation, it wasn't impossible to say that he was Gao Qingye's master. The only doubt was that Gao Qingye had ascended, but Yi Shiwen, as his master, hadn't ascended? Could it be that there was some unknown reason behind this? The evil ghost Granny died tragically, and the gloomy aura in the sky dissipated. However, there was still endless darkness. Yi Shiwen looked into the void and said, "Come out, all of you. I'll take on whatever grudges you have with the pilgrimage palace. Sigh, in the end it still has to be like this." Suddenly, a sigh rang out from the darkness, and a trembling figure walked out from within. It was an old man with green hair, and he looked thin and withered, as if he could be blown away by the wind at any time. "Why do you have to come one by one? It's a waste of time. Why don't you come together?" Yi Shiwen said. He naturally had his own considerations for saying this. The simplest reason was that his martial power couldn't support so many people one by one. The remaining energy in the ring would decrease with each use. "There's no need. As long as you defeat me, today's matter will end here," the old man said slowly. Unlike his trembling body, his voice was completely sonorous and powerful. "That's St. Qing Ji." In Pilgrimage Mountain, someone suddenly opened his eyes wide, recognizing the identity of this old man. He had an incredulous look on his face. How could it be St. Qing Ji? Didn't he die a few hundred years ago? Rumor has it that he was a peerless genius who could compete with Senior Gao. I don't know why he couldn't ascend later. Rumor has it that he died a few hundred years ago. I didn't expect to see him again. Many people sucked in a breath of cold air as they felt a chill run down their spine. This was a true expert of the same generation as Gao Qingye. Most of the people of that generation had already achieved success and fame, ascended, or even died, leaving behind an illustrious reputation. Even those like the evil ghost Granny who rose later could stir up the world. Everyone had a special kind of fear towards the existences of their generation. In the past, it was not that there were no cultivators on earth. However, before the catastrophe, the laws of heaven and earth were broken and there was not enough spiritual energy. Even if there were cultivators, they would hide in the mountains of the major sects and would not come out easily. It was not until after the catastrophe that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was restored. Countless spiritual energy poured down from the heaven realm, making the world suitable for cultivation again. It was precisely because of this that a large number of experts of the new generation were born. Among them, be it Gao Qingye or old St. Qing Ji, they were both outstanding figures of the past. Even though hundreds of years had passed, their fame had not faded in the slightest. These were the peerless experts of their generation. "Can you represent them?" Yi Shiwen squinted his eyes and said. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He did not mind killing all of these people who came to attack him. These people could not escape from the destruction of the Holy Palace a few years ago. "I think it's possible." Old St. Qingji nodded. "There is no need to shed more blood today. As long as you can defeat me, then everything will be written off. Gao Qingye and I have been rivals for many years. Now, I never thought that I would have the opportunity to fight with his legendary master. I don't care where you come from, but don't insult his name." "I don't need you to tell me that." Yi Shiwen shook his head coldly and said, "Don't pretend that you have a good relationship with him. Do you still dare to say that you have a friendship with him? Moreover, write it off? You think too much. There were hundreds of thousands of people in the Holy Palace, including the servants and handymen. Now there are only a few people left. Who do you think you are? Do you think you can just write it off?" Yi Shiwen sneered and said, If you come now, I will kill you right now. It doesn't matter if you are timid and don't come now. In the future, when Xiaoxian is successful, he will naturally find you one by one to settle the score. Arrogant boy, don't go too far. An old voice came from the darkness. It was the roar of an old monster who was hiding somewhere. Yi Shiwen's strength had already made them want to retreat. They did not want to fight to the death with such a strong person. In their opinion, even if Yi Shiwen was not Gao Qingye's master, he could be said to be at the peak in terms of strength. In the current martial arts world, there were not many people who could compete with him. It would naturally be best if they could write it off. However, Yi Shiwen was like a mad dog and would not let go even if he died. Suddenly they were furious. So what if I went too far? Besides, even if I went too far, can I be compared to you people? My disciple has been unstoppable all his life. He should not end up like this. Yi Shiwen said faintly. Either come and let me kill you now, or wash your neck clean and come back to settle the score. The golden divinity on Yi Shiwen's body was dazzling. There was a divine aura flowing around him. He was not afraid at all. Standing alone in the sky, he was like the only sun in the world, about to cool this side of the world. Go, I don't believe that with so many of us. How can we not be a match for him alone? Someone in the darkness said angrily. Obviously, he was completely angered by Yi Shiwen's arrogant words. In this case, no matter what, Yi Shiwen would not let them go. Then they might as well counterattack at this time. Maybe there would be some chance of winning. Although Yi Shiwen was tyrannical, they were not easy to deal with. That's good, I will kill all of you together. It will save me the trouble of looking for you one by one. Yi Shiwen said faintly. He was not afraid at all. One person's aura was enough to compete with thousands of soldiers and horses. One person blocked the aura that erupted from everyone. Haven't you all already handed over to me to deal with? It's fine if I win, but if I lose, you all will not be a match for him. Just leave as soon as possible. Old sage Qing Ji glanced at the boundless darkness behind him, and then said firmly, You still understand some things, but it's a pity that you are not a match for me. Yi Shiwen sighed, shook his head and said, How will you know if you don't try? I believe in fate too much in my life. Gao Qingye doesn't believe in fate, so he can ascend. Today, I came to borrow the letter that he left behind to take a look. As long as you hand it over, I will leave immediately. Old sage Qingji said clearly. Don't talk so much nonsense. If you come to hit us when we are down, then you come to hit us when we are down. You don't need to find so many excuses for yourself. Yi Shiwen said faintly. Well, I won't say much. Old sage Qingji sighed, and the real elemental energy in his body instantly boiled like a vast sea. It ignited the void in an instant, as if it wanted to burn the sky and boil the sea. The strength of a veteran great sage broke out in an instant. He was wearing an emerald green divine robe. It was incomplete, but the quality was extremely high. It protected his whole body. At this time, he was no longer as skinny as before. On the contrary, he had become tall and straight, like a matchless god of war. His whole body looked green from head to toe. Boom! He pressed down towards Yi Shiwen, and a gust of wind suddenly erupted. It blew away everything in the world, as if it wanted to shatter everything. Humph! Yi Shiwen snorted coldly. He was too lazy to say anything. He blasted out a punch on the spot. He didn't even use the angel's sword. He let the angel's sword block the water moon treasure ring. The fist energy distorted the air, smashed everything, and blasted directly towards the big hand. Boom! There was a fierce collision. Every inch of the sky was shattered, forming a chaos that made people feel terrified. That was the real strength of the battle between two great sage-level figures. Poochie! Blood splattered out. It was none other than old sage Qingji. His palm was simply a mess. It looked like minced meat. Blood splattered out, exposing the white bones. He had been injured by Yi Shiwen. How is this possible? His holy armor is refined by an ancient great sage. He is almost invincible when he wears the holy armor. Even a great sage tool would find it difficult to break it, let alone bare hands. What kind of monster is he? How can his body be so terrifying? God, what kind of method is this? What kind of body is that? It is even more terrifying than the body of a demon beast. Many old monsters exclaimed in the darkness. They belonged to the same generation as old sage Qingji. Perhaps they also belonged to the same level of strength. They had heard of such a famous great sage tool even if they hadn't fought against each other. However, they had never heard of anyone who could contend against it with their body. Even Saint Qingji's eyes were filled with unconcealable shock. He did not believe that such a shocking thing could happen. It was simply impossible. If any random person could be so terrifying, then what was the point of him wearing the saint armor? His hand wasn't covered by the holy armor. However, a great sage tool naturally wouldn't be so simple. He only felt a powerful force bombarding his internal organs. He suppressed it with great difficulty with all the martial power in his body. Take my punch! Old sage Akiji let out a loud roar, stirring up the power of heaven and earth, cooling everything. A green divine wind manifested on his fist, and the laws wrapped around it one by one. It was as though in this pitch-black night, he was the only source of light between heaven and earth. Bang! His fist smashed the sky and blasted towards Yi Shiwen. Chapter 23:30. Elder Sage Qingji's punch was like the first gust of violent wind in the world. It swept everything and completely destroyed everything in the world. It directly shrouded Yi Shiwen. "Humph, your fist technique is far from perfect," Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. He clenched his fist, and golden fist energy overflowed from his fist. Human Dao fist. His punch instantly blasted out a huge world. The sky was covered under this world, suppressing everything. The terrifying power of the world was displayed incisively and vividly at this time. What kind of martial arts is that? Everyone was shocked and looked at Yi Shiwen. They did not know what kind of fist technique Yi Shiwen had created in the void was. This was a fist technique that was beyond the limits of their understanding. It was far beyond what they had learned and what they knew. In their knowledge, they had never heard of such a powerful fist technique that could actually create a world. Compared to this fist technique, everything they had learned before was weak. They were not on the same level at all. Originally, they thought that Yi Shiwen would not be able to withstand Elder Sage Qingji's fatal punch. Who would have thought that Yi Shiwen would have such a technique? The violent storm that old sage Qingji had blasted out shattered inch by inch in an instant. He was completely suppressed in all aspects. He was far inferior to Yi Shiwen, whether it was his martial power, the grade of his martial arts, or the comprehension of his fist technique. Although Yi Shiwen had only cultivated for a few hundred years, he possessed the mysterious space. His cultivation experience was more profound than those old monsters who had cultivated for tens of thousands of years. It was not something that ordinary people could imagine. Elder Sage Qingji was unwilling. Yi Shiwen's world was becoming more and more powerful. He wanted to struggle, but there was no way. He could not get around Yi Shiwen. Break! Elder Sage Qingji's body constantly erupted with powerful divine power. The green brilliance rushed into the sky as if it had a life of its own. It wanted to escape from Yi Shiwen's hand and constantly trembled. He wanted to break free from Yi Shiwen's hand with the power of the holy armor and wait for an opportunity to counterattack. Rumble! A tsunami-like voice surged from Akiji's body as a powerful force erupted from his body. This powerful force also triggered an even more powerful force. The sacred armor was awakened by this force, providing him with endless power. It instantly turned into a ray of light that soared into the sky. It tore the sky and instantly escaped from the suppression of Yi Shiwen's world of humanity. Boom! The intense collision was like the sound of steel breaking, instantly bursting out. Many people who heard this sound felt so uncomfortable that they wanted to vomit. It was really too terrifying. This kind of feeling was heart-wrenching. He escaped. Old Sage Akiji escaped from the hands of Senior Yi. Someone exclaimed. They didn't know Yi Shiwen's real name. They only knew that his surname was Yi from Liaoliren. Elder Sage Akiji relied on the power of the holy armor to escape from Yi Shiwen's attack. He finally regained his foothold and wanted to fight with Yi Shiwen again. But how could Yi Shiwen give him this opportunity? He let out a long roar on the spot and chased after him. The peerless sharpness erupted. He directly blasted out a punch. In an instant, the same world of humanity blasted down. This was a vast and mighty power. It seemed as if it was splitting the heavens and the earth. It broke through the horizon and made people feel as if they were going to be crushed by it. Elder Sage Akiji let out a long roar. His green hair fluttered and the holy armor burst with amazing light. He directly punched out. Boom! The sky was suddenly pierced by the fist technique of the two. It pierced through the past and the present and instantly struck out with the power of creating the world. Rumble! A series of explosions sounded. Everyone on the pilgrimage mountain was suppressed by this force. They couldn't raise their heads at all. The power of a great sage surpassed them by too much. Even the sage realm was no exception. They couldn't compare with a great sage at all. Not to mention that these two were at the peak of the great sage realm. Only Gao Shuexian had the restriction left by Yi Shiwen, so there was no problem. She could stand and watch the two people fighting in the sky. Boom! There was a huge explosion, and old sage Qing Ji let out a muffled groan. Everyone realized that a huge bloody hole had appeared in his chest. Yi Shiwen's fist had penetrated through the sky, and had passed through all obstacles. It had shattered his holy armor, and had blasted a huge bloody hole in his chest. How is this possible? Even the holy armor was pierced. How can his fist technique be so powerful? The power of a great sage should be very difficult to pierce through. Many people were shocked. Even those old monsters hiding in the darkness were the same. They all knew Akiji's strength very well. Just now it was still fine. After all, Akiji's arm was not covered by the holy armor. However, his chest was the most tightly covered part of the holy armor. How could it be pierced through? Blood splashed out. Elder Sage Akiji coughed continuously and coughed out blood. His body was already very old. At this time, he was on the verge of collapse. How can you pierce through my holy armor? Elder Sage Akiji's eyes were also filled with disbelief. Because my fist is harder than your holy armor. There is nothing that I can't break, Yi Shiwen said with a smile. Boom! Yi Shiwen's tyrannical power broke out. Elder Sage Akiji felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His whole body was about to turn stiff. Boom! Yi Shiwen's fist blasted out and pierced through the void. It was as if it had directly bombarded from the other end of the long river of history. It was so strong that ordinary people couldn't understand it. What kind of power is this? It's so scary. Someone exclaimed. Then, they only saw Yi Shiwen's fist directly shatter Elder Sage Akiji's holy armor. His fist stopped 3 inches in front of Elder Sage Akiji. Elder Sage Akiji's turbid eyes flashed with a rare clarity. At that moment, he almost thought that he was dead. He couldn't block this punch at all. Puff! He spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes dimmed a lot. Why didn't you kill me? You should be glad that you said that you came to read the letter and not to sever the bloodline. Otherwise, do you think that you would still be alive? Yi Shiwen looked at Elder Sage Akiji and said with a cold smile. Only now did everyone understand why Yi Shiwen wanted to kill Evil Ghost Granny and Xiaqingshan's 7 monsters. They wanted to kill Gao Shuexian. Naturally, they had touched Yi Shiwen's reverse scale. Yi Shiwen couldn't take care of the pilgrimage palace. Such an accident had happened to the pilgrimage palace. Now, these people actually wanted to sever the bloodline. This completely enraged Yi Shiwen. I understand. I've lost. Elder Sage Akiji coughed out a mouthful of blood and said, Today, I had a delusion. I deserve this. This matter has nothing to do with me anymore. I'm leaving. Elder Sage Akiji staggered and slowly disappeared into the void. On the other side, the boss of Xiaqingshan's 7 monsters was about to escape. Yi Shiwen said loudly, Did I say that you can leave? Do you still want to kill us all? The boss of Xiaqingshan's 7 monsters roared angrily. So what if I do? You have done such things many times. Now you are pretending to be innocent in front of me. I want to kill the chicken to warn the monkeys. I want to see how many people want to test whether their necks are harder or my sword is harder, Yi Shiwen said. The face of the boss of Xiaqingshan's 7 monsters was red. He was completely infuriated by Yi Shiwen's words. It was simply too much. Not only did he want to kill them all, but he also wanted to kill the chicken to warn the monkeys. He had become the sacrificial chicken. He was a dignified great sage. Unlike the guy who entered the great sage realm through trickery like the Blood Crow Archbishop, he was a genuine great sage realm. Now, he was being looked down upon. However, the person in front of him really had such strength. He did not know that for Yi Shiwen, he was no different from a chicken. Killing the chicken to warn the monkeys. Of course, he had to kill a few powerful chickens to scare the monkeys living in the dark. If he didn't care about the energy, it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill all these old fellows in the dark. However, he suddenly stopped thinking about it. He had killed enough today. He would leave the rest to Shaoxian when he grew up. He did not believe that he, a dignified god, could not teach a qualified disciple. I'll fight with you! The boss of Xiaqingshan's 7 monsters roared. He was about to pounce on Yi Shiwen, but at the critical moment, he quickly retreated and fled in the opposite direction. Idiot, do you think you can escape? Yi Shiwen did not give in at all. He stepped forward, and the angel's sword suddenly appeared. It turned into an amazing sword light and blasted forward. Boom! The boss of Xiaqingshan's 7 monsters was hit by the angel's sword on the spot. He did not have Saint Qingji's holy armor to protect himself. He screamed on the spot and was killed by the angel's sword. His physical body was torn apart and scattered in the sky. Those old guys in the dark were completely shocked. Obviously, Yi Shiwen's way of killing the chicken to warn the monkeys had a very good effect. They were completely deterred by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen easily beheaded several great sages, which completely frightened them. The cultivation that they were proud of was nothing in front of Yi Shiwen, let alone threatening Yi Shiwen with it. They were completely threatened by Yi Shiwen, but they had to endure it. Otherwise, they suspected that Yi Shiwen would kill them on the spot. Yi Shiwen took a deep breath. This energy had been consumed by more than half after a series of battles. The remaining part would naturally dissipate later. Suddenly, he raised his head and smiled. Since a friend from the Beast Clan is here, why don't you come out and meet me? Everyone was shocked. How come we don't know that there are people from the Beast Clan spying on us? Chapter 23:31. Yi Shiwen said as he stretched out his big hand, and directly grabbed the Water Moon treasure ring. The Water Moon treasure ring struggled for a moment, and was suppressed by Yi Shiwen's Celestial Emperor tool, Refining Art. The Emperor-level power technique was naturally very useful at this time. This level of martial tool could not resist the Celestial Emperor tool, Refining Art. Especially after the death of Xiaqingshan's 7 devils, there was no one to control it. For him, it was just a slight effort. He had already refined the Water Moon treasure ring in a moment. He threw it directly, and the Water Moon treasure ring flew into Gao Shuexian's hand on Mount Pilgrimage. It was like a bracelet and was worn on her wrist. However, no one paid attention to this at this time. Everyone's spirits were lifted. The war between the demon beasts and the human race had lasted for thousands of years since the Great Cataclysm. It could be said that the human race could not expand outwards because they were being held back by the demon race. They couldn't even fight their way out of the solar system. Jupiter had almost become the base camp of the demon beasts. If the human race wanted to leave the solar system, they would have to overcome the huge problem of the demon beasts. Both sides had already formed a blood feud for thousands of years. It was unknown how many people of the human race died in the hands of the demon beasts every year. It was not the same as the base camp of the human race. Although there were some demon beasts, they were not enough to cause a disaster. On Mars, the demon beasts' forces were very huge, and they were also quite rampant. On Mars, the flames of war were still raging. Everyone present was the elite experts of the human race. How could they not have fought with the demon beast? In the sects and clans, it could be said that many had died in the hands of the demon beast. However, no one would doubt Yi Shiwen's words. After all, with his tyrannical cultivation, it was normal for him to find the traces of the demon beasts that everyone couldn't find. You still don't come out? Do you want me to catch you? Yi Shiwen's big hand clawed towards the void. In that incomparably dark night, a figure suddenly appeared. A huge figure appeared in the void. In the darkness, those old antiques were shocked. A demon beast was hiding nearby, but they didn't sense it at all. If it had attacked, wouldn't they all be annihilated? At this time, the demon beast was forced out by Yi Shiwen, and they finally saw what it was. This was a creature that looked like a pitch-black snake. It was a two-headed snake, and its bloodline was different. It was especially good at hiding, and it had almost no aura at all. Its body was also ice-cold, and it was very difficult to be discovered. Since you're here, then stay. Yi Shiwen didn't know how this news had spread so far and wide that even demon beasts had come. In the past 1,000 years, humans had developed rapidly and countless experts had emerged. However, compared to the demonic beasts, they still did not have much of an advantage. They could only barely maintain a balance. Humans also had the means to develop science and technology. One could imagine that there was no lack of experts among the demonic beast. Roar! The two-headed snake roared. As it surged, wind and thunder surged, and heaven and earth shook. It turned out to be a great saint-level vicious beast. It had been hiding nearby, and none of the great sages had noticed it. Although most of their attention was attracted by Yi Shiwen, they were great sages and masters of a region. It was very strange that they didn't even notice that a demon beast was close to them. Looking at this two-headed snake, many people were even more shocked in their hearts. That's the double-headed snake. I remember now. Isn't it the monster that destroyed an entire bee squadron and swallowed every single person in it 10 years ago? Some of the people present had military backgrounds. How could they not remember these vicious beasts that had committed heinous crimes? They were all recorded in their record. Although not every vicious beast could be remembered, such a vicious beast that destroyed a subfleet level was a monstrous giant. They couldn't not remember it even if they wanted to. So it's him. No wonder he could get so close to us. It's said that this beast is best at hiding his tracks. It's said that he didn't even get discovered when he brushed past the reinforcements. He's amazing! Swish! This two-headed snake's huge body twisted and sprayed venom toward Yi Shiwen. It was almost like a bow and arrow. It instantly arrived in front of Yi Shiwen and shrouded him. Yi Shiwen grabbed the angel's sword in his hand. Under his urging, the sword light instantly skyrocketed. A soaring sword intention soared into the sky, and the venom that sprayed over instantly burst. Immediately afterward, the sword light in his hand did not diminish. On the contrary, a huge sword net was intertwined in an instant, and it directly rushed toward the two-headed snake. It shrouded one of the heads of the two-headed snake in the air. The terrifying sword net formed by the sword light of the angel's sword instantly shattered the space, and directly suppressed one of the huge heads. Puff! Blood splashed out. This big snake turned over and screamed. Its entire head was blown up in the air. It couldn't stop Yi Shiwen's sword light at all. Its physical body was very strong, but how could it stop the sword light of the angel's sword? This was a martial instrument that was sacrificially refined by the emperor. Although he had not yet achieved Tao at that time, it was extraordinary and far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. This two-headed snake seemed to have the bloodline of some exotic beast. It could be said that it had cultivated to the great sage realm. Coupled with its innate magical power, it was very easy to hide. Even if it encountered a great sage realm master who was more powerful than it, it would be difficult to deal with it. But unfortunately, it encountered Yi Shiwen. Bang! The huge snake's head exploded completely under Yi Shiwen's sword light. It was completely fragmented and turned into a rain of blood that fell from the sky. A terrifying power spread in all directions. Roar! This two-headed snake screamed again and again. In the sky, it was constantly tumbling. The void was constantly shattered by the rolling body. It kept tumbling in the sky. Many big shots looked at this scene and watched the two-headed snake's head being crushed. This kind of scene was simply shocking, especially compared to before. Although Yi Shiwen had beheaded a great sage before, it was still more shocking compared to such a huge scene. An invincible great sage-level vicious beast that could destroy a powerful subfleet had its head crushed so easily by Yi Shiwen. Everyone was drenched in cold sweat as they watched. None of the previous battles looked as horrifying as this one. The twin-headed snake finally understood that it had probably hit an iron plate this time. It immediately turned around and frantically flew into the distance. But how could Yi Shiwen let it escape? The sword light flew directly and slashed down on the spot. Puff! The remaining head of the two-headed snake was also blown up by Yi Shiwen in the air. The huge body fell directly on the spot and was caught by Yi Shiwen into the ring. The body of a great sage realm beast was a treasure from top to bottom. This was already a top-notch creature in the mortal world. An ordinary person couldn't even see it once, let alone killing a great sage realm demon beast. With this lesson in mind, the old monsters hiding in the darkness spread out their divine senses to scan the surroundings. Only then did they feel relieved. After keeping the body of the two-headed snake, Yi Shiwen said loudly, "If there is nothing else, get out of here. I don't want to see you now. If I see you again, then don't blame me for being rude." As soon as Yi Shiwen's voice fell, these old monsters who wanted to leave turned into a group of light and disappeared. Ordinary people couldn't see their traces, but Yi Shiwen could see them clearly. Yi Shiwen received the energy and landed on the ground. Originally, he wanted to spend some time in closed-door training to break through to the truth realm, but after absorbing this huge amount of energy, he smoothly stepped into the truth realm and didn't even need to face the heavenly tribulation. Moreover, he rushed into the second level of the truth realm in one fell swoop. Now, he could fly on his own without the help of demon wings. He returned to the main seat and said loudly, "This time, I am very grateful that everyone came to help me. I will repay you in the future." "Senior, you are too polite. We really didn't do anything." "Yeah, these are all solved by Senior himself. We are ashamed. These are all what we should do. But our pilgrimage palace will be closed for a while. I hope everyone can bring my words out. In the future, I will take charge of everything related to the pilgrimage palace. If there are any grievances, just look for me," Yi Shiwen said loudly. There were only 2 or 3 kittens left in the pilgrimage palace. It was not suitable to rebuild it. He wanted to bring Xiaoxian along now, and the rest did not matter. Although everyone was puzzled as to why the pilgrimage palace was closed, they did not have any say in this matter. Yi Shiwen had defeated many famous experts. Even old sage Qing Ji had been defeated by him. This news quickly spread throughout the entire cultivation world along with these individual practitioners. It was especially true for the higher-ups. This news had spread overnight. Everyone knew that the Holy Palace had produced a ridiculously powerful ancestor. Although many people had some doubts, when did Gao Qingye, who had always been self-taught, have such a master? They had never heard of it before. There was no news at all. However, Yi Shiwen's tyrannical strength couldn't be faked. Even if it was an ordinary great sage, he could kill them easily without any exception. Many people suddenly became nervous. It didn't matter whether Yi Shiwen's identity as a master was real or fake. However, he still had to put on an act. Moreover, he had issued such a strong declaration before. He wanted to settle the scores with them one by one. This made many big shots who had a guilty conscience to begin with suddenly become nervous. Chapter 23:32. If Yi Shiwen had not made such a tough declaration, they might have felt better. However, Yi Shiwen's words were getting tougher and tougher. He had no intention of settling this matter peacefully. This made many big shots even more frightened. They didn't know where this old monster came from. He was so strong. Whether he was Gao Qingye's master or not, he made them restless. If this person was easy to deal with, he might have been eradicated a long time ago. However, everyone already knew that this person was not easy to deal with. Ordinary great sage was not his opponent. He seemed to be unafraid of being besieged. This made this person look even more troublesome. No one knew whether this person was an enemy or a friend, but the only thing that was known was that this person's strength was extraordinary. Perhaps he was really Gao Qingye's master. 10 days later, on a mountain road outside Fuzhou Bay City on Earth, a young man in casual clothes walked slowly. Beside him, there was a little girl who was only a few years old. She looked smart and cute. Although the young man's stride was quite big, this smart little girl could keep up completely. Her face was not red, and she was not out of breath. "Xiao Xian, how do you feel now?" The young man just walked forward and asked without looking back. These two people were Yi Shiwen and Xiao Xian. "Grandmaster, Phoenix Regeneration Arcane Fruit has a miraculous effect. I have been able to slowly stabilize my injury. I believe that with the progress of my cultivation, the original root of the disease will be completely eradicated," Xiao Xian said unhurriedly. She was well-behaved and had no special characteristic. However, when she said it with her childish little face, she looked extraordinarily cute. After more than 10 days of recuperation, coupled with Yi Shiwen's teaching of Phoenix Regeneration to Xiao Xian, she was able to stabilize her injury by herself at this time. Yi Shiwen did not treat her again. He let her slowly recover on her own. It had an immeasurable effect on deepening the understanding of Phoenix Regeneration Arcane Fruit. This experience would also have an immeasurable effect on her future cultivation. However, Yi Shiwen was slightly surprised by little Xian's talent. It was as if he saw the shadow of Xiaoye in the past. Little Xian was even better than Xiaoye. He had just passed down the Phoenix Regeneration technique a few days ago, and little Xian was already able to use it. Such talent was indeed quite shocking. However, he also knew that talent was one thing. If it was not properly nurtured, such amazing talent would also be wasted. It hadn't been long since he had returned to Earth, and he had finally received news about his family. Thousands of years had passed, and the world had changed. Mountains and seas had been moved. It was completely different from thousands of years ago. Even Yi Shiwen's family in his previous life had been annexed by the expanded base city. However, he did not give up on the search. Instead, he spent a lot of money and sent people to search in secret. The modern world's technology was so advanced that it was not difficult to find a person. However, it was not easy to find a person from thousands of years ago. Yi Shiwen even felt that it might be impossible to find him at all. Unless the main body personally descended and used a great divine ability to calculate, it would be impossible to find them at all. It was even possible that they had all died in the great catastrophe. And now there was finally news. Qingyun Mountain's Zhang family had risen in the great catastrophe. Outstanding figures had appeared in every generation. The current Zhang family's Zhang Li had been on the front line against demon beasts for a long time. He had made outstanding military achievement. Later, he became one of the most powerful people in the country. Now that he had retired, he still had a great influence. Thousands of years ago, the Zhang family was just an ordinary family. However, thousands of years later, it had become a rich and powerful family. No wonder Yi Shiwen could not find anything. It turned out that the Zhang family had also been included in the key confidential information. Zhang Rui, the elder brother of Zhang Xian, the first ancestor of the Zhang family, had mysteriously disappeared and never appeared again. This was his name from his previous life, and the information that was passed over only had this one sentence written before it ended. This was all thanks to the Zhang clan's current status. Otherwise, if it was an ordinary commoner, no one's information could be stored for over 1,000 years. However, that name was only recorded because it was related to Zhang Xian. Zhang Rui, such a distant name. Yi Shiwen felt as if it had happened countless years ago. Even if he had become a god, but becoming a god did not mean that he had cut off his 7 emotions and 6 desires. It was just that he had buried his emotions deeper so that his actions would not be affected by his emotions. However, it was not that he had cut off his emotions. On the contrary, after hundreds of years of accumulation, this feeling was even more intense. Originally, he thought that he would never have the chance to return to Earth in this life. He could only bury his feelings in the bottom of his heart. Now that he had found out about it, his longing was like a surging tide. Although he had prepared for it, but when he really saw the records, his parents were just ordinary people. They had never practiced martial arts in their life and eventually died a natural death. In that kind of chaotic situation, ordinary people didn't even dare to say that they had a future. The reason why his parents were able to pass away peacefully was because of the unexpected rise of his younger brother, Zhang Xian. Although he only managed to cultivate to the legendary realm, he laid the most crucial foundation for the rise of the Zhang family. After that, the Zhang family produced many masters and slowly became one of the few big families in China. The world was really unpredictable. Zhang Xian's younger brother, Zhang Xian, had only lived for more than 700 years. He had died because of the hidden injuries left behind by many years of war. He hadn't been able to live to the legendary realm's limit of 1,000 years. However, this was also normal. After all, the cultivation of a warrior was in defiance of the natural order. Many people had to burn their life to stimulate their potential in order to cultivate. Most people would die before they could even live to half of their limit. Yi Shiwen had also been like this in the past. He had relied on many heavenly treasures to overcome the difficulties. On Earth, the spirit energy had flowed backward from the heavenly realm for only 1,000 years. So, there was not enough time for heavenly treasures to grow. It was unlike the ancient times in Zhenwu, where heavenly treasures were thousands of years old, or even tens of thousands of years old. Their foundation was still too poor. The current head of the Zhang family, Zhang Li, was Zhang Xian's eldest son. Compared to Zhang Li, it could be said that the pupil had surpassed the master. Moreover, he had practiced to the peak of the sage realm. He was the person with the highest cultivation in the Zhang family. Speaking of which, Zhang Li was his nephew, his biological nephew. Compared to other relatives, Zhang Li was naturally not as close to him as he was to other relatives. He might have been able to see Zhang Xian if he had come back a few hundred years earlier. However, it was too late now. He had practiced in the true martial world for only a few hundred years. However, 1,000 years had passed on Earth. This indicated that he hadn't been reborn immediately after he had disappeared. Instead, he had drifted for a long time. He had finally figured out all the key points after he had come back. The mountain he was heading towards now was where the ancestral temple of the Zhang family was located. His parents and younger siblings were buried here. It was impossible for ordinary people to get close to it. However, this was naturally not a problem for Yi Shiwen. He had already entered the mountain quietly. He advanced all the way towards the ancestral temple at the top of the mountain. The ancestral temple didn't have much of a modern atmosphere. It was the same as it had been 1,000 years ago. It had green bricks and red tiles. It looked a little rustic. However, it was very amiable. Yi Shiwen entered the ancestral temple with Shaoxian. Rows of wooden memorial tablets entered his eyes. He glanced at them. He didn't know all of them. Obviously, they should be the younger generation. The ancestral temple had a total of 7 floors. It looked like a small tower. Although he had arranged guards to stand guard all the way up, they couldn't stop Yi Shiwen. They didn't even realize that Yi Shiwen had already entered the top floor. Compared with the densely packed memorial tablets on the other floors, there were only a few memorial tablets on the 7th floor. The names of his parents, younger sister, and younger brother, Zhang Xian, were listed one by one. Even his own memorial tablet was on the top. On the memorial tablet, there was a yellowed photo of a slightly young man. It was him who had just graduated from university at that time. If one were to take a closer look, one would discover that his appearance at that time was exactly the same as his current appearance. Perhaps this was also the connection between all living beings in the underworld that had allowed him to be reborn into Yi Shiwen's body. These familiar names, names that he had buried for hundreds of years, suddenly appeared in front of him, causing him to have mixed feelings. The heartwarming scenes from the past also appeared in front of his eyes. He just stood there in a daze, as if he was possessed. He looked at the memorial tablets of his loved ones, motionless. The sun rose and the moon set. 10 days. Yi Shiwen stood there in a daze for 10 days. It was as if he was possessed. He was motionless, as if he had become a statue. Next to him, Shaoxian saw that Yi Shiwen seemed to be possessed. Although he didn't know what happened, he simply went straight into cultivation. Ta-ta-ta. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps could be heard, and then 2 figures walked over. One of them was an old man, but his gait was as majestic as a dragon or a tiger, and every step he took gave off a feeling of power. Beside him was a middle-aged man with a scholarly appearance and a pair of glasses. They were completely dumbfounded. They never thought that there would be outsiders who could pass through the heavy guards to reach here. "Who are you?" The elegant middle-aged man suddenly jumped out. A fierce aura instantly erupted from his body. He no longer had the slightest trace of elegance. His cultivation was unexpectedly also in the legendary realm. However, the person in front of him only showed his back. He stood there in a daze, without the slightest intention of moving. The elegant middle-aged man glanced at the old man next to him. In an instant, he stretched out his hand and grabbed Yi Shiwen's shoulder with a dragon claw. Boom! Suddenly, he felt a burst of imposing aura erupting from the man's body. It automatically formed a protective shield and shook him away. Chapter 23:33. The elegant middle-aged man was directly sent flying. The old man's complexion suddenly changed. His eyes suddenly flashed and he shouted loudly, "Who are you?" The elegant middle-aged man flew upside down in mid-air and then landed in front of the old man, assuming a defensive posture. However, the man in front of him was still motionless, as if he had not felt anything at all. "Don't be nervous. Master has no malicious intent." At this time, Shaoxian was suddenly awakened from his practice and said in a formal manner. At this time, the two finally noticed the existence of Shaoxian, but their attention was attracted by the sudden appearance of Yi Shiwen. Who would notice the existence of Xiao Xian in the corner next to them? Who are you? The elegant middle-aged man shouted and was ready to attack at any time. However, he still relaxed a lot when facing Xiao Xian. At this time, Xiao Xian's cultivation was only at the Houtian realm. The gap between them was too big. This old man is Zhang Li. May I know who your excellency is, and why have you appeared in my Zhang family's ancestral temple? The old man asked, his eyes staring at Yi Shiwen's back. Zhang Li. Hearing this name, Yi Shiwen's back finally moved and he turned around. Imprinted in Zhang Li's eyes was an excessively young face. However, when he looked at his eyes, they were gray and lifeless, as if they had experienced 1,000 or 10,000 years. They were like a pool of stagnant water, without the slightest fluctuation. In these 10 days, Yi Shiwen had completely fallen into a dead silence. Although he was prepared, when he really saw the memorial tablets of his parents and relatives, he was still unable to extricate himself, and the world collapsed. When looking at Zhang Li, there was a slight fluctuation in his eyes and he said, "You are the current master of Zhang family, Zhang Li?" Zhang Li and the elegant middle-aged man were suddenly startled. Sure enough, Yi Shiwen had come for them. From the outside, the Zhang family's ancestral temple seemed to be nothing special, but the entire mountain was actually under strict security and precautions. Usually, there would not be too strict security. After all, this was just an ancestral temple. It could be said that it was important, but it could also be said that it was not important. Even if it was destroyed, it would not damage the foundation of Zhang family. But at the same time, it was also the spiritual sustenance of the Zhang family, so they would arrange for more strict security on normal days. It was impossible for ordinary people or ordinary demonic beasts to enter. However, a month ago, he had secretly ordered that he would come back to worship the ancestors. Although he did not alarm the high-ranking officials in the city, the guards of the ancestral shrine were all trusted subordinates of the Zhang family who had served the Zhang family for many years, so there was no need to worry that the secret would be leaked. It was reasonable to say that a thorough search should have been carried out by now. So, how could a person sneak in? Even a peak-level sage expert like him hadn't discovered this person. Now, all the high-ranking officials in Huaxiao were powerful cultivators. It was impossible to assassinate them as easily as it was in the past. They knew everything that happened within 100 miles. However, he didn't notice the person in front of him. How could he not be vigilant? As one of the most influential big shots in Huaxia, there were too many people who wanted to deal with him, so he had to be careful. "That's right, I am Zhang Li," Zhang Li said with rapt attention. Yi Shiwen looked at his old nephew, and felt even more pain in his heart. Thousands of years had passed, and everything had changed. Zhang Li looked at Yi Shiwen's face, and felt that it was very familiar. It seemed as if he had seen it somewhere before. Suddenly, he glanced at the memorial tablet that belonged to his uncle. The young man with a brilliant smile on the memorial tablet was exactly the same as the person in front of him. His expression suddenly became bitingly cold, and a murderous intention burst out in his eyes. He angrily shouted, "Your Excellency, what do you mean by this? You have trespassed into my Zhang family's ancestral shrine, and even want to insult my uncle? Why do you say that?" Yi Shiwen's eyes gradually returned to normal, and he asked, "Aren't you asking the obvious? Why did you disguise yourself as my uncle?" Zhang Li shouted. Although he had never seen his uncle with his own eyes, but when his father was alive, he often talked about this matter. Later, he sent people to search for his uncle for many years, but they couldn't find his whereabouts in the end, so he could only give up. The younger generation of the Zhang family might not be very clear about this matter. After all, Yi Shiwen had never appeared for them, and they didn't have any interaction with him. It was the same as the ancestors of a long time ago. They wouldn't have the slightest interaction except for the memorial tablets. However, Zhang Li was very clear about this matter, because he had been responsible for sending people to search for Yi Shiwen's whereabouts for a long time. Therefore, he felt that Yi Shiwen was so familiar when he saw him for the first time. Even if hundreds of years had passed, he still had a deep impression of him. Yi Shiwen grinned and said with a faint smile, "How do you know that I am disguising myself? Can't I look like this since I was born? You are also a sage realm cultivator, can't you see through the disguise at a glance?" Zhang Li was speechless. This was his biggest doubt. In this world, both science and martial arts were equally important. Whether it was the disguise of martial arts or the plastic surgery of science, it was impossible to hide from his divine sense. He could see through it at a glance. However, he couldn't see the slightest flaw when he looked at the person in front of him. It seemed as if he had been born with this appearance. Humph, so what if you look like this innately? Who is driving you? Don't think that you can disguise as my uncle just because you look like him. Zhang Li immediately said. More than 1,000 years had passed. Even if his uncle was still alive, it was impossible for him to look like a young man. This was his biggest flaw. He had already determined that Yi Shiwen had come to swindle and deceive him. He had even used his deceased uncle to swindle and deceive him. Zhang Li was extremely angry in his heart. He couldn't allow this person to be rampant. It has been 1,000 years since my uncle went missing. How can he still be alive? Even if he is alive, he won't look like this. This is your biggest flaw. Do I need to disguise myself? Yi Shiwen smiled and said, "Why can't I leave home at a young age and cultivate for many years? So I can maintain this appearance? Although cultivation can make people stay young, I have never heard of people who can stay so young. They are even younger than they were 1,000 years ago," Zhang Li said resolutely and decisively. Many people couldn't even live to the end of their lifespans due to the harsh cultivation environment on Earth. So, he didn't believe it at all. It seems that the Earth's environment has limited your vision. Yi Shiwen sighed and said, "I am me. There is no need to pretend, and there is no need. I don't want to get anything from the Zhang family. It's just that after 1,000 years, everything has changed. Although I didn't see your father when I came back this time, I know that the Zhang family is fine. So I am relieved. When I disappeared, you weren't even born yet. It's reasonable for you to have such doubts." Yi Shiwen's biggest regret was that he hadn't been filial to his parent. Time couldn't be reversed, and his parents hadn't died in the war. Instead, they had spent their remaining years under the care of his younger brother. This was the only comfort in his heart. Although it couldn't untie the knot in his heart, it was enough to comfort his guilt. Zhang Li looked at Yi Shiwen with a doubtful look in his eyes. No matter what Yi Shiwen said, this matter seemed strange. Although the matter of the Zhang family's king was classified as a confidential matter, it wasn't impossible for someone to investigate it if they wanted to. Moreover, this wasn't a secret of military technology. It was impossible to keep it secret to that extent. He wouldn't have wanted to take the risk if this man's cultivation hadn't been unfathomable. In fact, he would have captured this man a long time ago. He looked old. However, he was a sage expert after all. Moreover, he had been fighting on the battlefield all year round. So, no one in the Zhang family could compare to him when it came to killing. Suddenly, a person had appeared after 1,000 years and said that he was his uncle. He wouldn't have believed it if it were him. A long time passed and Zhang Li said, "You shouldn't be unfamiliar with these things if you're really my uncle." Zhang Li took out a small sealed box and said, "Originally, no one had seen my uncle's body after he had disappeared. So, only a cenotaph could be erected. These things were left behind by my uncle. They had been specially processed. So, Your Excellency should be able to recognize them if you're in person." He was doubtful in his heart. However, he wouldn't give up as long as there was even the slightest opportunity. These things had been left behind by Yi Shiwen in the past. His appearance could be recognized by looking at his photos, so it couldn't be regarded as a top secret. However, these things had never been shown to anyone, so no one would know about them, unless he was Zhang Rui himself. Opening the small box, a familiar feeling arose spontaneously. There was a slightly yellowed diary, a few game discs, and a phone that probably couldn't be used a long time ago. That was everything in the small box. Yi Shiwen's eyes were somewhat moist. Buried in this box were not these little things, but his previous life. This is my diary. If I remember correctly, the last entry should be on July 5th. Hehe. I don't have the habit of keeping a diary. I've been slacking off for 3 days and drying the net for 2 days. Even after 10 years, I've only managed to write down this diary. Yi Shiwen shook his head and said with a smile. It had been too long. So long that it seemed like a matter of his previous life. No, it was a matter of his previous life. It seemed as if something had cracked in Yi Shiwen's heart. Originally, the last step that had prevented him from becoming a god had been like a wall blocking his path. But now, a crack had appeared in that wall. He was naturally very happy in his heart. He hadn't expected that after several years of no progress, he would actually make progress just by looking at some relics of the past. This was simply a pleasant surprise. This is the CD that I had left behind when I was fighting magical beasts. This is my clothes. One by one, Yi Shiwen spoke tirelessly. It was exactly the same as what Zhang Li knew. He was somewhat startled. Was this really his uncle? Chapter 2334. These things had never been opened to the public. Even his son didn't know about it, let alone outsiders. Then there was only one possibility, and that was that he really was his uncle. Originally, Yi Shiwen's disappearance at that time was very strange. With the progress of the times, martial arts had become more and more well known. If Yi Shiwen went to learn martial arts from the powerhouse at that time, then everything made sense, including why they couldn't find him no matter how hard they tried, and why Yi Shiwen disappeared mysteriously. Nephew Zhang Li greets uncle. Nephew didn't recognize uncle just now, please forgive me. Zhang Li quickly bowed and said. He was also a person who could take it easy. Since he had confirmed that the person in front of him was his uncle, there was no hesitation. The whole scene looked abnormally strange. An old man actually knelt in front of a young man and called him uncle. Such a situation was very common among the cultivators. There were many people who had a successful cultivation and maintained their youthful appearance. It was just that, in the environment of the earth, many people could not maintain it for a long time. Get up, said Yi Shiwen faintly. I haven't seen you for 1,000 years. It's normal that you don't know me. Besides, I didn't contribute anything to the Zhang family. Zhang Li stood up and said, after uncle disappeared, father did not give up looking for uncle, but there was no news of uncle. I left home with a powerhouse to cultivate since I was a child. I didn't expect that the world had changed when I came back, said Yi Shiwen with a sigh. In the end, he still didn't tell the truth of the matter. The matter of his transmigration and rebirth was too bizarre. There was no benefit in not mentioning it. Zhang Li nodded. Zhang Li nodded. This was consistent with his initial speculation. There was only one possibility for him to suddenly reappear after disappearing for thousands of years. No wonder my secretary couldn't do anything to my uncle just now. His cultivation must have reached an incredible level. Otherwise, how could I not see through him? He might even be a great sage. Only a great sage could break into the ancestral shrine silently, without me noticing at all. Zhang Li nodded as this was consistent with his initial speculation. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel excited. As a top family in China, the Zhang family had a strong foundation after thousands of years of development. However, the Zhang family was still ranked at the bottom among the top families because they lacked a great sage to hold the fort. In this chaotic world, only the top forces could stand in this world. Although their family also had a good relationship with some great sages of sects, the forces of other sects were just other sects after all. How could they be compared to their own families? If the Zhang family could have a great sage, then there was no doubt that the Zhang family could go to a higher level and truly become the top family in China and even the entire world. They could compete with those huge sections. Right now, the Zhang family was able to summon the wind and summon the rain. To a large extent, it was because they had borrowed the power of the entire Huaxia Empire. In front of the state apparatus, especially with the great advancement in technology and mecha that could pose a threat to high-level martial artists, even sects would not dare to challenge the state apparatus. However, the Zhang family was the weakest among the top families. The reason was that they lacked a great sage to hold the fort. In contrast, they had always lacked the top deterrent force. Next to him, that elegant middle-aged man was also looking at Yi Shiwen with an incredulous look on his face. Although he was only a secretary, but he had personally accompanied Zhang Li to worship the ancestors. This clearly showed that he was Zhang Li's trusted aide, and was deeply trusted by him. However, he had followed Zhang Li for more than 200 years. But he had never heard of such a ridiculously powerful person in the Zhang family. Yi Shiwen had shaken off his attack without even moving. Even an ordinary sage expert couldn't do this. When I left home in the past, I didn't expect that the Zhang family would one day become a top family in China. The world is unpredictable. The will of the heavens is like a knife. It's probably like this. You have contributed a lot to the Zhang family's current situation. I didn't contribute at all. So, I'm just an outsider. So, there's nothing to say. Yi Shiwen said. What are you talking about, eldest uncle? We wouldn't have stayed in touch for so many years if we had known that eldest uncle was still alive. Zhang Li promptly replied. This is already unfilial of us. It's nothing. The Zhang family has been developing better and better these years without me, Yi Shiwen said. How could he not see through Zhang Li's thoughts? However, he was the ancestor of the Zhang family. So, these things were a matter of course. I've come back this time to pay my respects to my relative. I didn't want to alarm anyone. It's fate that I've met you. Eldest uncle, we didn't know that eldest uncle was still alive. So, we couldn't show our filial piety to you. Now that eldest uncle has come back, let us have the opportunity to show our filial piety. Zhang Li promptly said. Don't worry. I won't leave these next few days. You should be suffering from an old illness now. The limit of Sage Realm is 2,000 years. And you're not even 1,000 years old. So, you're already getting old. I will help you recuperate as much as possible during this period, Yi Shiwen said. Yi Shiwen had returned. So, it was impossible for him to do nothing and let the Zhang family go on like this as an uncle. Zhang Li had broken through to the peak of Sage Realm in just a few hundred years. Theoretically speaking, it was very easy for him to break through to the Great Sage Realm. However, he couldn't break through because his old injuries had consumed too much of his vitality. So, there was no way to go further. Yi Shiwen wanted to recuperate Zhang Li. Then, it would only be a matter of time for him to break through to the Great Sage Realm with his accumulation. What? Zhang Li opened his eyes wide. He couldn't believe it. This was simply a miracle. He was one of the top experts in China. It could be said that he was close to a solution. However, he couldn't do anything about his own chronic illness. He had fought on the battlefield in his early years, leaving too many internal injuries. It was not a big deal when he was young, but now it had collectively broken out. He should have just reached the prime of his life, but in fact, he had already entered the stage of old age. It could be said that he was prematurely aging. And this is not a big problem. It will be fine as long as you recuperate for a period of time. At that time, you still have a lot of time to break through to the Great Sage Realm. If you have the opportunity in the future, it is not impossible to go further. The Great Sage Realm is just a preparation for the real starting point of cultivation. Yi Shiwen nodded and said. He was talking about the later transcendent realm. In his opinion, the previous realm was just laying the foundation. Only by entering the transcendent realm could one truly enter the cultivation. If this matter was revealed, it would definitely be shocking. However, with his identity and strength, he was qualified to say this. Zhang Li couldn't believe it. Listening to Yi Shiwen's tone, it seemed that even the Great Sage Realm, the highest realm in the mortal world, was nothing. It was simply unimaginable to what extent his cultivation had reached. It was unfathomable. He was even more delighted in his heart. He could fully imagine that if he could get Yi Shiwen's support, the development of the Zhang family would definitely be able to reach a higher level. The next generation of the Zhang family might even have a chance to ascend to the highest position. You are still young. In the environment of the earth, it is already good to have such cultivation. If you can go further in the future, you can support the future of the Zhang family. As your uncle, I can't help you too much. I can't protect the Zhang family's wealth for eternity. You should know that the world will decline when it reaches its peak. The Zhang family is now on the path of prosperity. How long it can be maintained is not up to me or you, but it depends on whether there can be a continuous flow of talents in the future, said Yi Shiwen. Even if he had entered the Tao confirmation, he couldn't guarantee that he could protect a force for 10,000 years. After all, even if it was an immortal inheritance created by the gods, it was not uncommon for it to decline or even be completely annihilated in the end. As the ancestor of the Zhang family, it was already worthy of the Zhang family to be able to protect the Zhang family's wealth for thousands of years. It was impossible for him to take care of everything. Thank you, uncle, said Zhang Li quickly. The old illness in his body had been torturing him for many years. Xiao Xian greets Marshal Granduncle, said Xiao Xian with a formal salute. Zhang Li was Yi Shiwen's nephew. He was considered as Gao Qingye's junior. For Xiao Xian, he was naturally Marshal Granduncle. Uncle, this is? Asked Zhang Li, looking at Yi Shiwen. This is the descendant of an apprentice that I accepted. You deserve to call you Marshal Granduncle, said Yi Shiwen. The more Zhang Li looked at Xiao Xian, the more familiar he felt, as if he had seen her somewhere before. You don't have to look. Her ancestor is Gao Qingye, said Yi Shiwen. At this moment, Zhang Li finally remembered why this little girl looked so familiar. This person was none other than Gao Qingye's only remaining descendant, Gao Xuexian. She was the one who had caused a sensation during this period of time. As one of the top big shots in China, it was naturally impossible for him to be ignorant of what happened in the pilgrimage palace. In fact, there were people from the military who went there at that time. Everything was transmitted back in real time, so he was very clear about it. China also felt that the remaining bloodline of the pilgrimage palace was very troublesome. On one hand, the pilgrimage palace played a great role in the development of China in the past. On the other hand, it was difficult to provoke the various forces. It was just that Yi Shiwen and Xiao Xian disappeared later. No one knew where they went, but the pilgrimage mountain had been sealed. It was sealed by the array laid by Yi Shiwen. Many people wanted to go and explore, but they were blocked by Yi Shiwen's array. Many people secretly sighed at the exquisiteness of the array. It was in harmony with heaven and earth. It was almost operated by the power of heaven and earth, so it did not need other energy to provide. Although the great sage was strong, it was still far from competing with heaven and earth. It was just that he never expected that the person who looked down upon in the rumors was actually his uncle. Chapter 2335. In the past few days, the rumor about the powerful senior Yi on Mount Pilgrimage had spread throughout the human world. Even the demonic beast world had spread the news. Yi Shiwen was too strong. In the face of the siege of a group of great sages, he did not fall into a disadvantageous position. He even dared to say that he would kill all the great sages present alone. After seeing Yi Shiwen kill several great sages in succession, everyone did not doubt whether he had the ability to kill the rest of the great sages. Compared with him, the strength of the others present was also too far apart. No one was strong enough to compete with him. The reason why Yi Shiwen let them go made them dumbfounded. He actually left them to the future Gao Shuexian, which made many people even more afraid. But at least they were a little relieved. When Gao Shuexian grew to the point where she could threaten them, it might be hundreds or thousands of years later. At that time, these old guys might be dead. The only trouble was that Gao Shuexian might pose a serious threat to their descendants. However, it was not so easy to become a great sage. If it was so easy to become a great sage, then it would not be 1 in 10 million people. It was not enough to describe it as rare. How could it be so simple? Gao Shuexian's threat was something that would happen hundreds or thousands of years later. In fact, it might even happen 2,000 or 3,000 years later. However, Yi Shiwen's threat was close at hand. He was an old monster whose age was unknown. He was also an old monster whose strength was unknown. No one knew when he would erupt. This was the most frightening thing. This was a realistic threat. The Chinese government had always been quite a headache for such an old monster with unknown origins and strength, and who used to cultivate in unknown mountains and forests. Basically, they needed to pay attention to them for a long time to prevent these weird old monsters from doing something unmanageable. Such things happened repeatedly. Some old monsters were eccentric. As soon as they came out of the mountains, they found that the world had changed greatly and caused a lot of trouble. Zhang Li had also received a report on this matter some time ago, but he had never imagined that the ridiculously powerful and unreasonable old monster mentioned in the report was actually his own uncle. At this time, his mood was mixed, but in general, he was extremely happy. His uncle was so powerful, so the benefits for the Zhang family were naturally great. He suddenly thought of the news he had received before. Many forces were getting restless and wanted to join forces to eliminate this unstable factor. After all, many of them felt guilty. They had made a mistake in the matter of the pilgrimage palace. Many cruel and merciless people did not want to let this threat grow. At that time, he felt that it didn't have much to do with him, and as the highest leader of the country, he naturally didn't want to have such power that wasn't under his control. But now it was different. Since the legendary old monster was his uncle, then everything was completely different. If those people dared to come to the door, he would not be polite. Although the Zhang family did not have a great sage, it was still one of the top families after all. The military power that they could mobilize was enough to make those people reconsider their opinions. It wasn't easy for Big Uncle to return. How could he let the old man be disturbed again? Yi Shiwen and Zhang Li paid their respects to their parents and loved ones, and then left the ancestral temple. They came quietly and didn't disturb anyone. No one knew that Zhang Li had returned. Instead, he took a private plane back to the imperial capital. After 1,000 years, this was the first time Yi Shiwen had come to the imperial capital after his return. Compared to 1,000 years ago, there were many tall buildings, and it was more modern. The Zhang family was also one of the top families in the imperial capital. They lived in a huge villa area in the old district of the imperial capital base city before it expanded. The entire villa area was tightly protected. With Zhang Li leading the way, they naturally didn't need to go through layers of security check. They naturally entered the Zhang family's villa area. After thousands of years of reproduction, the Zhang family had also multiplied many branches. However, most of them lived in this villa area. Therefore, the entire villa area had become the Zhang family's ancestral land. The villa where Zhang Li lived was in the most central area of this villa area. It was also the most heavily guarded area. There were even soldiers standing guard at the door. This was the protection of these elders. Zhang Li and the others had just entered when a beautiful woman of about 30 years old came out and quickly said, "Father-in-law, you are back?" She looked up and was somewhat surprised to find that although her father-in-law had returned, he was not the first one to enter the door. On the contrary, the first one to enter the door was a teenager who seemed to be only 18 or 19 years old. The first impression this teenager gave was that he was clean. Yes, very clean. His clothes were not necessarily luxurious. It was very simple, but it gave people a feeling of cleanliness. He didn't have the kind of immaturity that ordinary teenagers had. On the contrary, he had a kind of steadiness that didn't match his age. At the same time, he walked in front of Zhang Li without feeling anything. It was as if he was born to be like this. And Zhang Li seemed to have acquiesced to this situation and automatically fell half a step behind this teenager. "Uncle, this is my eldest son, Zhang Xianda's wife, Yu Xiuqin. She has been married to Zhang Xianda for more than 300 years. Now, my wife and I live here with my eldest son's family." Without waiting for the beautiful woman to ask, Zhang Li quickly took the lead to introduce and said. The beautiful woman opened her mouth and widened her eyes. She almost suspected that she had misheard. "What is this situation? Uncle? Did I mishear just now because I was distracted?" Zhang Li actually called this teenager uncle. One must know that she had been married to Zhang Xianda for more than 300 years. Now that the old lady didn't manage the family affairs, she was managing the Zhang family from top to bottom. How come she never knew that there was such an uncle? Moreover, he looked so young. He looked much younger than her grandson. "What are you looking at? Hurry up and salute uncle," Zhang Li immediately said with a straight face. He had always attached great importance to these etiquettes. He was an extremely old-fashioned person. In these years, he even picked up the classics and read them. He usually boasted that he was an old Confucian scholar. In the hearts of the people of the Zhang family, they were somewhat rigid and old-fashioned. The people of the Zhang family usually saw Zhang Li's extremely serious side. It should be known that a big shot like him could even be on an equal footing with a great sage-level expert. But now, he was being respectful to this teenager. It seemed that he was even more unhappy than if he was disrespectful to him. Although she hadn't figured out the situation yet, Zhang Li's accumulated prestige over the years made her salute subconsciously. "Greetings, big grandfather." The beautiful middle-aged woman quickly saluted and said. She quietly raised her head and glanced at Yi Shiwen. However, she completely accepted it. She didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. Even Zhang Li didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. "Alright, no need to be so polite." Yi Shiwen supported her. The beautiful middle-aged woman suddenly felt that she was being supported by an irresistible force. She was secretly startled in her heart. This big grandfather who came out of nowhere isn't simple. His strength is unfathomable. At least, he's much stronger than me. "Xiuqin, go and prepare a room for your big grandfather." "I want the best one," said Zhang Li. Yu Xiuqin was a little surprised. She was very clear about the best room that Zhang Li mentioned. It was the place where Zhang Xian originally lived. However, it had been empty after Zhang Xian passed away. Zhang Li didn't allow anyone to disturb it. Now, he actually wanted to tidy it up for this young man. Of course, tidying up wasn't a problem. In fact, every room would be cleaned every day. They could move in at any time. It wasn't a big deal. However, the significance of this made her a little surprised. "Big uncle, that is the room where my father lives." "Usually, my father has been talking about how good it would be if he could find you. If my father knew this in the afterlife, he would be very happy," said Zhang Li with emotion. He seemed to be able to see Zhang Xian's regretful appearance until now. However, he didn't expect that he would have the opportunity to find his long-lost uncle after 100 years after Zhang Xian passed away. "Help Xiao Xian to tidy up a room too," She will live here during this period, said Yi Shiwen. Although Xiao Xian was young, he was quite mature. It wasn't suitable for him to live with her. Oh yes, I was negligent. Xiuqin, tidy up a room for Xiao Xian, said Zhang Li. Yes, Grandpa, said Yu Xiuqin quickly. These were all trivial matters. This villa was very big. In fact, their family couldn't live in many places. Most of the rooms were empty as guest rooms. Okay, then let the servants take me up. I will take a rest first. Come up to call us when it's dinner time. You also prepare a little. We will treat you later, said Yi Shiwen. He took Xiao Xian and followed the servants to the third floor. He didn't act coy. Speaking of which, this was his home, although it was late for more than 1,000 years. Watching Yi Shiwen's figure disappear, Yu Xiuqin whispered to Zhang Li, Grandpa, this big grandfather is. There was a smile on Zhang Li's face. He was naturally very happy to meet his big uncle unexpectedly. Moreover, his big uncle was the extremely powerful person in the report. This is my father's elder brother. He is my big uncle. In other words, he is your big grandfather, said Zhang Li. Treat him more respectfully than you treat me. Do you understand? He was also afraid that his daughter-in-law wouldn't serve him well enough and offend Yi Shiwen. This was not a simple elder in the family. At the same time, he was also an unfathomable great sage master. Yes, but why have I never heard of such a big grandfather? Yu Xiuqin frowned slightly and voiced out the doubts in her heart. Chapter 2336. Uncle left home to practice with a master since he was a child. It is normal that you have not heard of him, Zhang Li said with a smile. Yu Xiuqin would have thought that the person in front of her was her father-in-law if it were not for the fact that she had known Zhang Li's aura for hundreds of years. Today, he smiled more than he had in the past month. However, there was such a big grandfather inexplicably. Moreover, it was such a young big grandfather. She felt strange in her heart. He was even younger than her grandson. Even her great-grandson was not so young. However, since Zhang Li had said it, then there was no doubt about Yi Shiwen's identity. Now that there was an elder above her head, she had to consider more. Soon, the news that there was an old ancestor in the family spread throughout the Zhang family's villa area. As a large clan with thousands of years of inheritance, because it was a warrior clan, it was common for people to marry and have children at the age of several hundred. Therefore, the reproduction rate was relatively slow. However, to this day, just the direct descendants of the Zhang clan that could live here numbered in the thousands. Originally, in the Zhang family, there was only one surviving old ancestor, Zhang Li. Now, there was an old ancestor who was even more senior than Zhang Li. Many people felt a little fresh, especially Zhang Li's children. Except for those who were in other places, the 3 children who were still in the capital had all rushed back overnight. They had another big grandfather. Such a big event, how could they not come back? However, when they saw Yi Shiwen's appearance, they had a feeling that you must be King kidding me. An old monster that was thousands of years old actually looked like a teenager. They really felt that you must be King kidding me. There was a kind of messy feeling in the wind. But this person did not come to the door by himself, but was brought back by Zhang Li himself. They could question Yi Shiwen, but could they also question Zhang Li? Zhang Guojie only knew a little about Zhang Li's eldest son. Every time Zhang Li formally worshipped the ancestors, he would bring him along. As the eldest son, he had naturally seen the memorial tablet of the big grandfather Derui. This big grandfather who he had never met, didn't he disappear thousands of years ago? Was it really as the old man said, that he left home to practice when he was young and had just come back? Brother, don't tell me that's really big grandpa? Zhang Guoxiong, the third son of the Zhang family, carefully glanced at his eldest brother and said. Outside he also held great power and had entered the ranks of high officials. However, at home, he still had to follow the lead of his eldest brother, Zhang Guojie. This was a rule set by the old master, Zhang Li. As the eldest son of the first wife, under the situation where the old master did not manage most of the family affairs, he was still in charge of all the Zhang family matters, big or small. I haven't seen it either. How would I know? Zhang Guojie said gloomily. Where did this big grandpa come from? How would he know where he came from? Old master also said that he wants this big grandpa to treat him. At this time, Zhang Li's fourth daughter, Zhang Xueqing, said. As Zhang Li's eldest daughter, after having a few sons in succession, she was naturally doted on by everyone in the family, so she was more courageous from a young age. If there was someone in the Zhang family who wasn't afraid of Zhang Li, it would be Zhang Xueqing. We don't have the right to question the old master's decision, Zhang Guoxiong said, but since the old master has verified it, then it shouldn't be wrong. In any case, Zhang Li's position in their hearts was naturally needless to say. His words carried enormous weight. However, the problem was that if he had only recognized a big grandpa, then it wouldn't be a big deal. Anyway, he came back alone, so it was impossible for him to seize power or anything. However, he wanted to treat the old master's illness. As Zhang Li's children, they were naturally very clear about the state of Zhang Li's body. The accumulated old injuries over the years had already made him exhausted, and no one knew how many years he could live for. As for the rise in price, Zhang Li was a stabilizing force. One more year of life was one more year of benefit, especially in the case that the next generation of the Zhang family had not yet fully grown up, so they couldn't do without this stabilizing force. Anything related to the physical safety of the old master would arouse their extreme concern. In the end, they didn't have much trust in this big grandpa of unknown origin. In the Zhang family, except for Zhang Li himself who had confidence in Yi Shiwen, the others were skeptical. Whether this person was the legendary big grandpa or not, let alone whether he had the ability to treat the old master's illness. All kinds of national masters had tried, but there was no way to cure him. They could only slowly nurse him back to health, and try to prolong his life as much as possible. However, the decision that Zhang Li had made was naturally not something that they, as children, could question. Although they were worried, there was no way to refute it. This was the decision made by the old master. Yi Shiwen was naturally very clear about what they were worried about, but he was too lazy to explain. Because there was no need to wait until the results were out. He stayed in his brother's room until dinner time, and then came down with Xiaoxian. Although they had already heard about Yi Shiwen, but when they saw the young appearance of Yi Shiwen, it still made Zhang Li's children feel a little dazed. Yi Shiwen smiled slightly and didn't feel anything. In the end, the foundation of the earth was too shallow. If it was in another world, it would not be surprising. What are you looking at? Hurry up and salute, Zhang Li quickly said with a straight face. Big Grandpa! Big Grandpa! Greetings, Big Grandpa! Several people said one after another, not daring to make Zhang Li unhappy at this time. Sit down. Yi Shiwen took Xiaoxue and sat in the main seat. Everyone was silent and soon the meal was finished. Everyone left the table and entered the living room. Yi Shiwen said, I can help you treat now. Zhang Li glanced at Yi Shiwen and said, Uncle, do you want to prepare a secret room? No need, it's the same anywhere. Yi Shiwen said. That's fine, Zhang Li said. The eyes of the others were fixed on Yi Shiwen, as if they wanted to see how Yi Shiwen would treat Zhang Li. Stretch out your hand, Yi Shiwen said. Zhang Li stretched out his hand, and Yi Shiwen put his hand on it. Suddenly, the seemingly ordinary Yi Shiwen's martial power suddenly soared to a terrifying level. Then, Zhang Li suddenly felt a strong martial power pouring into his body, accompanied by a faint phoenix cry. He suddenly felt that the original stubborn disease in his body, like ice meeting the scorching sun, instantly disintegrated. His body was unprecedentedly clear, and he felt that he hadn't felt so refreshed for many years. His current movements were more agile than the younger generation, and this was supported by his martial power, but his body had decayed to a certain extent. And it was precisely these old wounds that had caused his body to decay and become old. Now, these old wounds, under the treatment of Yi Shiwen's martial power, had disintegrated one after another, making him feel incomparably comfortable. His face was red. Zhang Guoxiong and the others next to him looked very anxious, because they didn't know whether Zhang Li was feeling good or bad just by looking at his face. After a long time, Yi Shiwen finally opened his eyes. At this time, he was also slightly out of breath. In order to treat Zhang Li, he had consumed most of the great sage's martial power. After all, Zhang Li could be said to have an old disease. The meridians in his body had long been old. He must be careful at all times, and it also consumed a lot of mental power. After all, he was still not comparable to the deity. "Thank you, uncle." Zhang Li could feel that his body was relaxed, and there was no longer the feeling of walking in mud like before. And all this was brought by Yi Shiwen in front of him. He was extremely grateful. If there were some doubts at the beginning, then now he had no doubts at all. If he was not really his uncle, who would help him treat him for free? Zhang Guoxiong and the others' faces were bright. Just now, they were still doubting whether this grandpa had the ability to treat their family's old man. They even thought of the idea of taking action in case of any changes. Now that they thought about it, they were really gauging the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. However, when they looked at Zhang Li, who turned around, they were suddenly shocked. Zhang Li, who was originally very old, had returned to the appearance of a middle-aged man at this time. He looked younger and stronger than them. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they would not believe such a bizarre thing even if they were beaten to death. In their impression, people of this age were old and unbearable, which was a very normal thing in itself. This was also the reason why they were suspicious of Yi Shiwen. You are in the prime of your life. The reason why you age prematurely is because of the hidden injuries in your body. Now that the hidden injuries are healed, naturally, you don't have to worry. You can also try to break through the great sage realm when you are in the best state now. The success rate should be very high," said Yi Shiwen. "Thank you, uncle. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't know that I actually have the opportunity to break through the great sage in this life." The joy on Zhang Li's face was naturally not fake. He thought that he did not have much time left, but he did not expect to return to the prime of his life. At least he could live for hundreds of years more. If he could enter the great sage, he could live for at least a few thousand years more. No one really wanted to die, and he was no exception. At this time, he really believed that Yi Shiwen might really be Gao Qingye's master at that time. Although it was chaotic at that time, and many things were not recorded, but it was also at that time when Yi Shiwen left home and disappeared. There was really this possibility. Of course, he never thought that Yi Shiwen accepted Gao Qingye as a disciple in the heaven realm. Chapter 23:37. With the live effect of Zhang Li, the other Zhang family members were convinced by Yi Shiwen. There was no way for them not to be convinced. The power of this grandfather was far beyond their imagination. Next, at Zhang Li's request, Yi Shiwen treated the old wounds of other people in the Zhang family. Compared to Xiao Xian's injuries, these were much easier to deal with. There was nothing difficult to treat. Yi Shiwen's martial power was completely exhausted, and he was barely able to treat the old wounds of the Zhang family members. After being treated by Yi Shiwen's Phoenix regeneration technique, the benefits could be imagined. In addition to the complete cure of the old wounds, their bodies were also cleared by Yi Shiwen. It would be easier for them to cultivate in the future. Their future would be smooth. Compared to their predecessors, they would be able to go further. Although Yi Shiwen did not have the strength of the deity, the experience and consciousness of the deity were still there. Not everyone had the luck to have a deity personally treat and clear their bodies. They couldn't realize how lucky they were. Although they didn't know Yi Shiwen's true strength, it was enough to know that Yi Shiwen's strength had probably reached an unfathomable level. Even many people in the Zhang family had a breakthrough on the spot after Yi Shiwen eradicated their old wound. Initially, their cultivation was only a little bit away from breaking through, but because of the old wounds, they couldn't go further. Now that they were cured by Yi Shiwen, they naturally had a meteoric rise. Among them, Yi Shiwen especially favored Zhongli. He was already at the peak of the Sage Realm. Now, he was only a step away from the Great Sage Realm. He couldn't stay forever. The most important thing for the Zhang family to have their own Great Sage. It just so happened that he could teach Shaoxian, so in the next half a month, he constantly explained the path of the Great Sage. On Earth, the Great Sage was almost the peak of all realms. Many great sages didn't know much about cultivation. Many of them relied on luck to cultivate to the Great Sage realm, but it was completely different for Yi Shiwen. To him who was already on a mortal level, Great Saint was just a very ordinary stage in his cultivation. It was nothing at all. Many of the key points of the cultivation of the Great Sage realm were under his control. Almost all the situations that might be encountered in the cultivation were within his expectations. Under his tireless explanation, the people of the Zhang family who were qualified to listen had a detailed and terrifying understanding of the way of the Great Sage. Originally, this required a very profound foundation. Only the cultivation records and experience of generations of great sages could have such an astonishing and deep understanding. However, Yi Shiwen alone was equivalent to the experience left behind by thousands or even tens of thousands of experts in the history of the Zhang clan who had attained the Great Sage realm. Even the various problems that he might encounter during the breakthrough couldn't escape his control. There was no problem at all. At the same time, he was also explaining the Sage realm and some of the paths below it. Under his guidance, the second generation of the Zhang family, Zhang Guoxiong and others, collectively broke into the Sage realm, instantly improving the Zhang family's foundation by a level. But to really make the Zhang family a top family, the key still depended on whether Zhang Li could break into the Great Sage realm. As long as Zhang Li could break into the Great Sage, then the Zhang family didn't have to care about others anymore. In addition, the second generation of the Zhang family had entered the Sage realm. With Yi Shiwen's explanation of the way of the Great Sage, breaking into the Great Sage realm was only a matter of time. Therefore, there was no need to worry about the future of the Zhang family, but the Zhang family now needed a pillar who could enter the Great Sage. This person must be Zhang Li, and only Zhang Li. It could be said that Zhang Jiashan had experienced a blowout during this period of time. Yi Shiwen had mainly explained the Great Sage's way. However, he had taken into account that many people's cultivation was still very shallow. Therefore, he had directly explained the martial arts cultivation from the Hotian realm to the Great Sage realm. He even touched on the Transcendent realm. These included almost all the cultivation paths on Earth now. No matter what level the Zhang family members were at, they could get great insight. Many people's cultivation even had a few consecutive leaps, and their cultivation directly rose to an unimaginable level in one breath. Outsiders could only see that the Zhang family members, whether it was the older generation or the younger generation, were all in a blowout. Their cultivation could have huge progress every few days. As the Zhang family could be a top family, there would naturally be a lot of cultivation resources. The accumulation of thousands of years was quite considerable. However, in just half a month, the cultivation resources needed by these people for the blowout had consumed a small part of the Zhang family's accumulation of thousands of years. This rate of consumption could be said to be astonishing, but everyone in the Zhang family was willing to do so. Compared to resources, there was nothing more useful than directly exchanging them for strength. Of course, Yi Shiwen was still teaching Shaoxian. He had said that he would leave Xiao Xian to take revenge, but he wasn't joking. In this half a month, under Yi Shiwen's guidance, Xiao Xian had directly soared to the peak of the Hotian realm. His cultivation speed was so fast that even Xiao Ye was left in the dust. Of course, when Yi Shiwen was teaching Xiao Ye, there was no comparison between Xiao Xian's current cultivation level. No matter what kind of obscure martial arts cultivation path was difficult to understand, it seemed to become a very easy thing under him. There was no difficulty at all. In addition, little Xian was also very smart, so he quickly and thoroughly grasped the knowledge taught by Yi Shiwen. The Zhang family did not lack cultivation resources, and neither did Yi Shiwen. In the space ring, there were a lot of heavenly treasures which were reserved for this time. Zhang Li's breakthrough was only a matter of time. However, just as the Zhang family was waiting for Zhang Li's breakthrough, the news inside the Zhang family leaked out. The news about Zhang Li's upcoming breakthrough also spread throughout the cultivation world in an instant. It was noisy. In an instant, everyone already knew that Zhang Li was about to break through. This moment was like poking a hornet's nest. The Zhang family could rise to the top of China's huge family. Naturally, it was impossible to have only friends and no enemies. On the contrary, Zhang Li and Zhang Xian, who had a tough style in the early years, had offended many people. Many of these people were now influential. Usually, they did not dare to do anything because they were hindered by the state machine. However, this did not mean that they were willing to let the Zhang family rise to a higher level. In the current Earth, whether there was a great sage guarding or not was a completely different concept. The Zhang family did not have any sense of security until now because there was no great sage guarding. Although they could control the state machine as a deterrent, some people had already gone crazy. They were not afraid of the power of the state machine. Facing these people, even the Zhang family, who had a good relationship with some great sages, had no way to deal with them. However, if there was a great sage who truly belonged to the Zhang family, then everything would be immediately different. No matter how good the relationship was, it was not as solid as having such a great sage. The Zhang family tried every means to add a great sage, and others were even more unwilling to let the Zhang family have such a great sage. The Zhang family had already made many people very afraid. Not to mention, if the Zhang family really had a great sage, wouldn't it be nurturing a tiger that would invite disaster? Even some of the ancient families that could influence the political situation of Huaxia, like the Zhang family, did not want the Zhang family to have another great sage. In that case, the Zhang family would be more competitive, which meant that they would definitely lose some of their own interests. Even if they had a good relationship, it was impossible to give in the face of interests. Not to mention that their relationship was not very good. Except for a few in-laws and vassal families of the Zhang family, perhaps no one would really want the Zhang family to rise to a higher level. Therefore, all the major forces were either overtly or covertly pressuring the Zhang family, warning them not to let Zhang Li go further. The Zhang family was very angry. This was undoubtedly a very important time for the Zhang family. It was tantamount to transforming into a phoenix. If they could succeed, the Zhang family could even have a chance to become the first family in China. If they failed, they could only continue to hang at the bottom of the top. To a large extent, they could be ranked at the top because of Zhang Li's outstanding military achievements and unimaginable deterrence. Without a great sage, they could not even speak with a straight back. They had experienced this truth very deeply over the years, so they naturally understood it. Therefore, they were particularly angry. Cutting off one's source of wealth was like killing one's parents, not to mention such a big conflict. However, with so many forces jointly pressuring, it was conceivable how huge the pressure on the Zhang family was. It could even be said that it had reached the point where people could not breathe. The calm before the storm was like this. Even some forces that were hostile to the Zhang family also said that if the Zhang family dared to cross the boundary, then they would not rule out the possibility of using force to solve it. There were already enough people at the top of the food chain. They did not want another one to come and share a piece of the pie. Moreover, the Zhang family itself was at the top of the food chain. If Zhang Li really succeeded, then the Zhang family's right to speak would greatly increase. This was what many people did not want to see. For the Zhang family, who were in full swing of cultivation, hoping that Zhang Li could enter the great sage realm and finally let the Zhang family ascend to the supreme, it was equivalent to pouring a basin of cold water on them. Moreover, it was very cold water. It made them sober in an instant. Under the situation of being surrounded by a pack of wolves, there was no real foundation to stand on without a great sage realm master. If Zhang Li passed away, the Zhang family would immediately fall into an irrecoverable situation. This made their desire for the great sage in their hearts even stronger. Chapter 23:38. Not allowing the Zhang family to have a great sage was the answer of the major forces to the Zhang family. If the Zhang family crossed the line, then they would probably face the crazy counterattack of the major forces. At this time, the Zhang family discovered that their previous thinking was too simple and too naive. They thought that cultivating to the great sage realm was only their family's matter. In fact, things were far more complicated than they thought. Excluding those clans and sects that had deep conflicts with the Zhang family, the ones who truly feared the Zhang family were the great clans that were also ranked at the top. The Zhang family was already glorious enough. If they took another step forward, wouldn't they be standing above them? That was something that they absolutely could not accept. As for the Zhang clan, that was enough. This was also the biggest obstacle that the Zhang family faced. If it was an ordinary family or an ordinary sect, a great sage would not be opposed collectively because they had never ascended to the top. Originally, if the Zhang family could announce it after Zhang Li stepped into the great sage, then everything would be settled. Even if they didn't want the Zhang family to go further, they wouldn't really offend a great sage. In their eyes, it was difficult to defeat a great sage, let alone kill one. Not everyone had Yi Shiwen's abnormal strength. Who would have thought that the matter would be leaked out before this? This was the root cause of the real problem. As the matter fermented, it would also become more and more serious. Now, the Zhang family's disciples were already being monitored by many people. Although the Zhang family was well aware of it, they had no way to refute it. They could only watch them being targeted. Even if they were angry, there was no way to solve the problem. However, they all realized that there was a traitor. Otherwise, how could the news of Zhang Li's promotion to great sage be leaked out? Even in the Zhang family, only some of the higher-ups received the news. Under the anger of the Zhang family, they immediately launched an interrogation and soon found this person. It turned out to be a granddaughter-in-law of Zhang Li. After accidentally getting the news, she spread the news. Under the anger of the Zhang family, it was conceivable what kind of punishment they would do. It didn't take long for the granddaughter-in-law to disappear without a trace. From now on, no one had seen her. "Uncle, what should we do?" At this moment, Zhang Li's mind was also in chaos. Although he could be said to be a veteran of hundreds of battles and had already experienced countless hardships, there was nothing that could easily shake his mind. It was just that he was too concerned about this matter. Not only was it related to his future development, but it was also related to the future development of the Zhang family. Whether they could go to a higher level depended on this step. Although he knew some great sages and was on good terms with some great sages, not many people were willing to offend all these great sages for him. A friend in need is a friend indeed. At this time, there were not many great sages who were willing to pay attention to the Zhang family. This made the Zhang family feel a huge pressure. There was even a feeling of the collapse of the sky. If the Zhang family collapsed, they would not be spared when their nest was overturned. Several other juniors of the Zhang family also looked at Yi Shiwen. At this time, the only person they could count on was Yi Shiwen. You don't have to worry. I want to see how many people are really willing to use their lives to stop you from advancing to a great sage. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes, and his eyes were full of murderous intention. The matter of Yi Shiwen's return was limited to Zhang Guojie's generation. Others only knew that an ancestor had returned, but they did not know that Zhang Li's breakthrough was related to Yi Shiwen. In the case of Zhang Li's imminent promotion, everyone's attention was attracted by Zhang Li, so no one noticed Yi Shiwen hiding behind the scenes. Otherwise, they would also consider the result carefully. The Zhang family has developed rapidly over the years. Although it has become the top family in China, it has also offended a lot of people. Usually, these people will not jump out, and we have no reason to do anything to them. But isn't it just right now? Let's see who will jump out at this time. Whoever jumps out, we will crush him to death, Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. He also served as the master of the desolate era human clan for a long time. He was not ignorant of these means, but he rarely used them. Whoever jumps out, we will crush him to death. Zhang Li, Zhang Guojie, and others looked at Yi Shiwen differently. What is domineering? This is domineering. Even the Zhang family, which was known as a top family, rarely could really achieve this level of crushing whoever jumps out. After all, the Zhang family was not the only huge force. Basically, they had to compromise with each other on normal days. Yi Shiwen was different. He was used to solving problems with force, so his thinking path was completely different. The Zhang family naturally wanted to be so domineering. Whoever jumps out, we will crush them to death, but there was no such force at all. If it weren't for Zhang Li's influence and part of the power of controlling the national machine, there would still be a huge gap between the Zhang family's strength and other top forces. But even if they couldn't do it, it didn't mean that this grandpa who had just returned could not do it. In particular, Zhang Guojie and others had also heard about the amazing story of Yi Shiwen defeating several great sages in succession on Mount Pilgrimage. The Zhang family had also heard about this. When they first heard about it, they were almost scared to death. The invincible great sages had died, and several of them had died. Usually, the death of one would cause a shock. Not to mention so many deaths and injuries. Who would have thought that the old guy who showed his power on Mount Pilgrimage was actually his own ancestor? At this time, thinking about it, there was nothing to be afraid of with the ancestor around. Uncle, it doesn't matter if I am promoted or not. If something happens to you, how can I explain to my deceased father? Zhang Li shook his head quickly and said. Although he really wanted to be promoted to great sage, the degree of danger of this matter could be imagined. It was probably even more dangerous than that time on Mount Saint because there were more people who opposed it. Most of the forces were afraid that it would implicate them. No one wanted to add one more opponent. Yi Shiwen was the Zhang family's trump card. There must be no accident. It was fine even if he did not promote. After a few hundred years, the Zhang family's absolute foundation would improve. At that time, when he promoted, others would not have the ability to oppose it even if they wanted to. It was nothing more than the Zhang family tucking their tail between their legs for a period of time. He had confidence in Yi Shiwen, but there were probably too many great sages involved this time. He could not rest assured even if he was confident. Don't worry, they are just chickens and dogs. I don't care about them at all, Yi Shiwen said with a smile. His expression was incomparably confident. What a joke. As a dignified god, even if it was just a clone, if he couldn't even deal with these ordinary great sages, wouldn't it be a big shame? You can rest assured and promote. I will personally protect you when you cross the retribution. I want to see what kind of demons and monsters are going to jump out. They are really tired of living, Yi Shiwen said coldly. If there were really people who were ignorant, he did not mind killing them. With Yi Shiwen's words as the foundation, everyone in the Zhang family finally had the confidence. They replied to the outside world one by one that Zhang Li would never give up the opportunity to be promoted to great sage. If anyone intended to cause trouble, then let them come. The outside world was in an uproar. No one had expected that the Zhang family would still be so unyielding even at this point. Initially, they had thought that even if the Zhang family still had the intention of rising up, they would definitely not go against everyone openly under the pressure of the other major powers. That would be akin to slapping their faces. In particular, many veteran great sages felt that they had been slapped in the face. It was simply clamoring in their face. How could they let it go? In many people's opinion, they were somewhat afraid of the Zhang family because they were afraid of the state machine. However, Zhang Li himself was not in their eyes. He was at the peak of the sage realm and was not a great sage. What qualifications did he have to be compared with them? They suddenly felt that they were being looked down upon and slapped in the face. They were furious and immediately issued a statement. If the Zhang family really wanted to go against the trend and act like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, then they would not let it go so easily. What's more, this time, there were also several top clans among those who opposed Zhang Li's promotion. At least the state machine would not oppose them, which made them even more unscrupulous. They must teach the Zhang family a hard lesson and let them know what it meant to not cross the line. Some people also noticed that something was amiss. Given the Zhang family's strength, it was definitely impossible for them to challenge so many major powers at the same time. Unless they were tired of living and wanted to court death, it was impossible for them to oppose all of them at the same time. Could it be that the Zhang family still had a trump card that they had not shown? Logically, even if there was a great sage who was on good terms with the Zhang family, they would not confront so many major forces at the same time. The gains would not make up for the losses unless they were crazy. Many people were still very puzzled. In some people's opinion, this was simply the Zhang family had gone crazy. Otherwise, they would not be so insolent. Yes, in their opinion, the Zhang family was already insolent. Amidst such suspicions, time passed day by day. The various major powers never stopped paying attention to the Zhang family. However, the Zhang family didn't seem to care about it at all. It was as if they could monitor them however they wanted. This made many people feel even more baffled. Suddenly, in the sky above the imperial capital in the evening, countless tribulation clouds suddenly condensed and directly shrouded the area where the Zhang family's ancestral residence was located. In an instant, countless divine thoughts swept over and directly shrouded the Zhang family, not letting go of any suspicious traces. A figure flew directly out of the ancestral residence and looked up at the heaven's retribution in midair. Who else could it be but Zhang Li? The Zhang family is really bold. They actually ignored our warning. Chapter 2339. Zhang family is really bold. How dare they ignore our warning? There was a loud shout and the air exploded. In the surrounding space, there were already many powerhouses who had been eyeing covetously. Their attitude towards the Zhang family was surprisingly consistent. They must strangle the Zhang family's great sage in the cradle, at least not now. Zhang Li turned a deaf ear to these people because he believed that Yi Shiwen would take care of these people for him. Besides, he had already felt the terrifying pressure of heaven's retribution at this time. He had no time to be distracted because all of this was too horrifying. He had never felt such a terrifying heaven's retribution. Even the heaven's retribution of the sage realm that he had experienced before could not be compared to it. He could no longer imagine how terrifying the ascension retribution would be. The higher the level, the more terrifying the sudden changes in cultivation. However, the heaven's retribution that he had to face would also rise to an astonishing degree. Every step was like ascending to heaven. Every step was thrilling. This was the best adjective. But at this time, in any case, he had no way out. He must overcome the heaven's retribution of the great sage. Fortunately, he had prepared for this for hundreds of years. He originally planned to wait for a few more years to give it a try, even if he had to risk his life. Now that the old wounds on his body had been healed by Yi Shiwen, it could be said that he was in an unprecedented state. With Yi Shiwen's protection outside, it could be said that it was the best time to cross the retribution. You don't have to worry about them. Leave them to me. Cross the retribution seriously. Yi Shiwen's voice came from a distance. And Zhang Li nodded and said, "Stubborn." Suddenly, a master directly made a move. He stretched out a big hand and directly grabbed Zhang Li, who was in midair. Clang! There was a loud sound, and an amazing sword light slashed out from the Zhang family's ancestral land. It instantly broke the big hand. Ah! A scream was heard. In the distant space, someone screamed and covered his shoulder. He couldn't believe that he was seriously injured by this sword light. Not only did it break his cheek-condensed big hand, but more importantly, it penetrated through the layers of space and hurt his body. This was not an ability that ordinary people could have. It completely shocked him. Who is it? Sneak attack. Come out. Humph, sneak attack? You cowardly rats, come out if you have the guts. A cold snort came from the ancestral land of the Zhang family. Within the void, dozens of figures appeared. All of them were existences with tyrannical auras. At this moment, all of them had surrounded Lin Fan. A ray of light swept across the sky. At this moment, the people in the Zhang clan who were watching the battle finally saw clearly what the dozens of figures in the night sky were. There were dozens of figures in the sky. Most of them were knights riding nightmare beasts. These nightmare knights were the most powerful guardians of the Western world. They had been seriously injured thousands of years ago. However, they had now regained their vitality. These dozens of figures were all at the peak of the sage realm. They couldn't be compared to Zhongli. However, even a great sage expert would have to retreat if they were to gather together. These were the guardians of the Western Dark Church. The leader of this group was a powerful nightmare knight. He was expressionless, just like an ice-cold robot. His cultivation was much more tyrannical than these nightmare beasts. He had completely entered the great sage realm. Behind them, the other half was a group of priests. All of them were bishops of the sage realm. The leader was a man wearing a red priest robe. He was a red-robed archbishop. Zhang Li, you have offended the Lord many times. You have prevented the Lord from spreading the gospel of the Lord in the East. However, the Lord will forgive you. He will let you repent to the Lord in heaven. The red-robed archbishop said slowly. His eyes were filled with incomparable sincerity and firmness. It's really a big move. However, this is an internal matter of our East. I'm afraid we don't need to trouble our friends from the West. Zhongli said. He didn't expect that a great saint knight and a cardinal would personally lead a team. Moreover, because of him, the Holy Church of Shadows and the Radiant Church, these two monstrous organizations that had been fighting against each other for countless years, joined forces. Of course, this had something to do with the fact that when he was in power, he tried his best to suppress outside religions from entering the country. During the years when he was in power, Christianity, the Eastern Orthodox Church, and other religions all suffered heavy losses. Hundreds of years of development were all wasted. Naturally, it was impossible for them not to hate him. However, in the imperial capital of Huaxia, such a huge force could enter. Obviously, it had been tacitly approved by some forces. He couldn't help but sneer. In order to suppress the Zhang family, they had really put in a lot of effort. Since they couldn't be the villain, they let others do it. With such a huge lineup, even if there was a great sage standing on the side of the Zhang family, he would probably be scared away. Two terrible great sages, plus the Nightmare Knights and the Bishop Legion under their command. Even a great sage would only have a dead end if they encountered them. I heard that you suffered a catastrophe thousands of years ago. I didn't expect that you would still dare to intervene in the affairs of our East. It seems that you have really forgotten the pain after the scar has healed. A sneer came from the Zhang family's ancestral land. It seems that you have recovered a lot in the past thousands of years. That's good. If there are fewer people, I can't kill to my heart's content. A figure flew up, and many people who were secretly watching the battle were secretly surprised. How is it possible? How can it be this person? Who is this person? Why are you all so shocked? You don't even know this person. He is the guy who killed in the pilgrimage palace. He said that he was Gao Qingye's master. How can he appear in this place? Damn, what is his relationship with the Zhang family? The moment they saw Yi Shiwen appear, everyone felt that this problem was thorny. For those at the bottom, they didn't know much. Perhaps they didn't feel anything. However, the higher the level, the more they understood what kind of strength and combat power was needed to be able to kill a great sage. It was not something they could imagine at all. If it was only the Zhang family, even if they could really invite some great sages, they wouldn't care. Would 1 or 2 great sages dare to go against them? Even if they dared to, they would just destroy them. Although great sages were rare, it was not to the point where they couldn't be killed. But if it was this guy, it was different. If he really went crazy, how many people would die to fill the gap? Many people were a little dumbfounded. In the face of this guy who could kill a great sage, they didn't have any confidence in dealing with him. That was already beyond the limit that they could deal with. However, for the Nightmare Knights and the archbishops, Yi Shiwen's name was not that famous. Naturally, it was impossible to scare them. Heretics who don't respect the Lord shall go to hell. The hot-tempered Nightmare Knights were the first to be unable to bear it. The nightmare beasts they sat on also let out a terrifying roar, shaking the world. The burning flames destroyed everything. Go to hell? If there is really a hell, if there is really a heaven, I will kill from hell to heaven, Yi Shiwen sneered. He didn't care about the so-called Lord at all. It was just another person who pretended to be mysterious. He had seen the fallen angels, and he didn't think much of it, let alone the so-called servants of the Lord. He took a step and appeared directly in the middle of the Nightmare Knights in an instant. It immediately caused a commotion among the Nightmare Knight. They didn't expect Yi Shiwen's speed to be so fast. It was almost at the peak. Bang! Before they could react, Yi Shiwen's fist had already arrived. With an unimaginably terrifying might, his fist blasted out, shattering the vault of heaven on the spot. The nightmare beast and its knight were also directly killed on the spot by Yi Shiwen's fist. Their bodies were blasted into pieces and fell to the ground. They couldn't withstand a single blow. Yi Shiwen didn't even need any magical powers to face these nightmare knights who were only at the peak of the sage realm. He could easily suppress them by relying on his tyrannical strength alone. On the other side, the great holy knight's eyes almost popped out of their socket. Any nightmare knight at the peak of the sage realm was the elite of the elite. It was unknown how much resources had been spent to nurture these absolute elite. They were usually independent existences. If it wasn't for the fact that they had to deal with Zhongli, they wouldn't have needed to deploy all of them. Of course, it was more to prevent the numerous powerhouses of China from suddenly attacking them. In the confrontation between the East and the West, the main confrontation was between the Vatican and China. However, they didn't expect Yi Shiwen to directly kill one of them with a punch. It was simply infuriating. Heretics, accept your judgment. The surrounding nightmare knights weren't frightened. On the contrary, their ferocity was stimulated. One after another, they roared and pounced towards Yi Shiwen. The nightmare beast they were riding on spat out hell's breath. It tore the sky apart and enveloped Yi Shiwen. The long spears in the nightmare knight's hands pierced through the sky in an attempt to pierce through Yi Shiwen. However, they saw a flash of golden light. 2 big golden hands pierced through the nightmare beast's hell's breath and tore it apart. The long spears in their hands were sage tools with infinite power. However, They couldn't even pierce through the surface of Yi Shiwen's body. The golden light on Yi Shiwen's body stopped them on the spot. Yi Shiwen flew out like an arrow and slapped a powerful Nightmare Knight on the spot. The powerful Nightmare Knight was smashed into pieces by his slap. Blood splashed out and formed a bloody rain in the sky. The entire scene looked incomparably bloody. In particular, Yi Shiwen looked like an invincible god of war who had survived from ancient times. Chapter 2340. Another Nightmare Knight was blasted to death. Sage Peak experts were like cabbages in front of everyone. Yi Shiwen had killed them just like that. This scene was really scary. The Western and Eastern sects were completely different. The Eastern sects absorbed the Lingqi of the world to strengthen themselves for cultivation. The Western sects were the complete opposite. They mostly relied on the power of faith to cultivate. They had special methods to absorb the power of faith. Therefore, even before the Great Catastrophe, when the Earth had entered the so-called degenerate age, they were still able to maintain their powerful fighting strength. Moreover, they quickly replaced the Eastern cultivation world after the degenerate age, and became the leader of the Earth's cultivation world. After the Great Catastrophe, the Chinese cultivation world had quickly recovered. However, they had suffered a great loss. Therefore, they did not have any advantage over the Western cultivation world. However, compared to the Chinese cultivation world, which relied on absorbing the Lingqi to strengthen themselves, the Western cultivators' cultivation was much easier. They could quickly become stronger as long as they had an unlimited amount of power of faith. However, they were weaker than the Chinese cultivators of the same level. Sage Peak was Sage Peak after all. Even a great sage would have to give way when so many Nightmare Knights were charging at them. However, Yi Shiwen had killed them just like that. The tragic death of two Sage Peak experts was enough to make the Dark Church feel distressed for a while. The relationship between China and the West had not been very good for a long time. Many big shots were naturally happy to see the Chinese suffer losses. It would be the best if both sides could suffer losses. These Nightmare Riders had gone completely berserk. Another member had been killed by Yi Shiwen. They roared madly as they rushed towards Yi Shiwen. In the sky, the hell breath of the nightmare beasts was everywhere, corroding the vault of heaven, creating a huge hole. Yi Shiwen sneered. The angel's sword appeared in his hand. He directly swept out a sword light that soared into the sky, and slashed down towards those Nightmare Knights. Those Nightmare Knights didn't have time to react. They became ghosts under Yi Shiwen's sword one after another. Poochie! 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 Every time, a formidable Nightmare Knight would die in his hands. Sage experts were like little chicks in his hands. He could kill a bunch of them if he wanted to. In the Zhang family's ancestral home, many members of the Zhang family were frightened and curious as they looked up. Whether it was the priest or the Nightmare Knight, they were all experts of the sage realm. They were far above the level of people they could only look up to. A sage expert wasn't a small figure anywhere. A great sage expert could only be used as a nuclear weapon to oversee a region. Only these sage experts could act as a hired thug and go on expeditions everywhere. Any one of them could be a formidable existence with an illustrious reputation. However, they had fallen from the sky like dumplings falling from the sky at this moment. They couldn't help but be shocked. Just by looking at the status of Zhang Guojie, Zhang Guoxiong, and the others in the Zhang family, one could imagine how glorious these Nightmare Knights were in the West. But now they were dead and nothing could be done. This ancestor of the Zhang family who suddenly appeared was really terrifying. He probably far surpassed ordinary great sages. Especially Zhang Guojie and the others who had been listening to Yi Shiwen's lecture during this period of time. Many great sages might not be able to understand the way of great sage. Yi Shiwen explained the profound in simple terms. Even these sage realm experts could understand it. Perhaps this ancestor's cultivation realm was even more terrifying than this. They were not very clear about how deep his realm was. Damn, the ancestor is so valiant. If our Zhang family has such a powerful ancestor, doesn't it mean that we can do whatever we want? Some juniors of the Zhang family said in shock. That level of battle was not something that they could participate in at the moment. They felt that they had benefited a lot just by watching. At Yi Shiwen's level, a seemingly ordinary attack contained the supreme great way. If one could comprehend it wholeheartedly, one would naturally gain a lot of benefit. Stop, you damn heretic! At this time, the red-robed archbishop could not help but be furious. Yi Shiwen was also slaughtering their Western forces. Although the luminous Vatican and the dark Vatican were fighting to the death, in general, they were all Western forces. Moreover, over the years, the rapid recovery of the vitality of the Huaxia cultivation world had also put great pressure on them. Although there were frictions on ordinary days, there were few life-and-death battles. If you don't stop, then don't blame us for punishing the Zhang family. He roared angrily when he saw that Yi Shiwen had no intention of listening at all. The bishops under his command began to cast spells one after another. The power of light continued to rush out of their hands, forming a group of extremely tyrannical power of light. Despicable! Many people in the Zhang family were paying attention to this battle. When they saw this scene, they were furious and cursed one after another. Yi Shiwen's eyes flashed, and a fierce, murderous intention suddenly burst out in his eyes. He shouted loudly and angrily, "Because of your words, the luminous Vatican will be in great trouble. Shut up, you bold heretic!" The red-robed archbishop could no longer tolerate Yi Shiwen's arrogance. He actually dared to threaten the luminous Vatican. As a behemoth that spanned across the world, almost no force could compare with it. For many years, it had completely dominated the battle with the Dark Vatican. For a long time, it had even forced the Huaxia cultivation world into a disadvantage with its own strength. There were not many who dared to threaten the luminous Vatican, but this Yi Shiwen actually dared to threaten them. You've forgotten the pain after the scar has healed. It seems like you've forgotten about the previous disaster. Then, let me remind you, don't cross the line. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but sneer. His eyes burst with an astonishing light, and the angel's sword in his hand burst with an astonishing sword light. He swept his sword across the sky, forming an incomparably huge beam of light. In an instant, the light power of the archbishops that were bombarding the Zhang family was cut in half. Just by relying on you chickens and dogs. Yi Shiwen's great sage peak power burst out, sweeping unabashedly. The sky and the earth were shaking, and the mountains were shaking. However, outside the Zhang family's ancestral home, there was a formation, so the battle inside could not affect the outside at all. Yi Shiwen could also be bold enough to attack. Swish! Light wings instantly appeared behind him, and his whole person formed an afterimage in the sky. He stepped out directly and instantly came among these priests. Poochie! He stabbed his sword into the body of a priest, and blood splashed out. This priest was still in disbelief before he died. It seemed that he did not expect Yi Shiwen's speed to be so fast. It was as fast as lightning, far beyond his expectations. The defense that he was proud of could not stop Yi Shiwen's sword at all and was directly broken. The power of his holy words could not even defend. The difference in strength between the two sides was really too big. Just now it was the Nightmare Knight, and now it was the priests and bishop. They belonged to two completely different kinds of light and dark energy, but in front of Yi Shiwen, it was nothing at all, and they could not stop his long sword at all. Poochie! 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 In his rage, Yi Shiwen went on a killing spree. How could these priests and bishops, who had weak defenses, stop him? Moreover, they didn't have an iron will. So, almost all of them were defeated by Yi Shiwen. In just a dozen breaths' time, more than half of them had been killed by him. It could be said that they had suffered heavy losses. The red-robed archbishop's eyes were wide open. He thought that this was a good thing, a lucrative job. If he could kill Zhongli with his own hands, then there would naturally be countless benefits for his prestige. It was not impossible for him to run for the Pope in the future. Therefore, he brought the elites of his subordinate, who knew that they would lose so many at once. It would take hundreds of years to make up for it, and all this was caused by the demon in front of him. In his eyes, Yi Shiwen was a great demon, almost the most terrifying and evil great demon in the world. If not, he could not bring such a heavy loss to him. He hated Yi Shiwen incomparably, even more than he hated the Dark Church. His heart was bleeding. Every time one of them died, he felt as if a piece of flesh was gouged out of his heart. They were the foundation for him to ascend to the supreme position in the future. He really wanted to vomit blood, but Yi Shiwen did not attack him. Every time he tried to save them, he was always a step late. He could not keep up with Yi Shiwen's speed. He was suffocating to death. He understood that Yi Shiwen was using his own method to tease him. Yi Shiwen did not attack him. Yi Shiwen was like a cat playing with a mouse. Yi Shiwen would behead his most elite subordinates one by one. Then, he would die of heartache. The red-robed archbishop understood, but he could not keep up. This kind of depressed feeling made him want to die. Soon, his subordinates were beheaded by Yi Shiwen. Even the Nightmare Knights were beheaded by Yi Shiwen. And it had only been a few minutes since the start of the battle. The speed of the battle was too fast. It was over before many people could react. Looking at this scene, many people could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Especially those great sages who were ready to make a move. When they saw this scene, it was as if they were splashed with a basin of cold water. F***ck, what kind of joke is this? Is this guy really human? He's simply a monster in human skin. Even if it was them, it was impossible to kill so many Sage Peak experts in such a short period of time. It was already very good that they did not get beaten and run away in embarrassment. This was really not a normal person. Many people's hearts were beating like drums. Were they really right to come this time? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.